Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1241 of the War News stream. And today we're seeing massive attacks on Moscow. Moscow is literally exploding under mass Ukrainian drone attack. We've also seen the Syrian rebels attack Israeli-backed forces in southern Syria. And also, U.S. officials are telling Ukraine to attack Russia quickly and very soon. And it's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world. As we've been able to hear significant developments from inside the Russian Federation, the United States of America, the Middle East, Eastern Ukraine, and the Eastern Pacific, all in the course of the past 24 hours. We have been able to hear the Ukrainian drone forces have heavily struck and damaged the Moscow area, with a large amount of air defense activity being seen, and airports around the surrounding area being shut down. We have also been able to hear of Ukrainian drone attacks being confirmed in the cities of Luhansk, Voronezh, and Dzержinsk within the Nizhny Novgorod Oblast during the time of the Moscow attack as well. Outside that, the United States of America has made it incredibly clear that through the office of the president, they are hoping and wishing that the United States will see that the Ukrainian armed forces will start to conduct larger armed offensives throughout the whole of the Ukrainian front line in an attempt to strategically push back the Russian Federation on the battlefield. The president of Ukraine retorted that the Ukrainians would need weapons to be provided to them to be able to make this a possible or practical reality, and it appears that the president of the United States was open to the suggestion. Outside of that development, we have also been able to hear inside the Middle East that an uneasy ceasefire has now begun to drop between the Syrian interim government and the Syrian tribal armies, as well as the Druze people of southern Syria, as both sides appear to be largely ceasing the fighting for now, although it's an incredibly uneasy ceasefire as we are continuing to see more Druze rebels and Syrian tribal army forces moving into the region to reinforce each other. We've also been able to hear inside of Israel that the Israelis have extended the evacuation orders inside the Gaza Strip to new regions, while at the same time more Houthi missiles were flying into southern Israel over the course of the night. Outside of that, we also were able to get news in East Asia that the People's Republic of China, through their foreign ministry, has once again stated that Taiwan is a part of China and nothing will ever change that, while the United States of America also conducted a joint naval exercise today within the area of the Timor Sea, near to the island of Timor, within the area of the Indonesian lands, or largely the Timor Sea. We have a significant amount of news to be covering today over just the past 24 hours alone, and of course, we want to make sure to get y'all into the news as fastly as we can, and to get y'all into the absolute depth of detail that we've been able to get before the stream started tonight. Moving on into our major news of the day, we have been able to hear that significant drone strikes have started to affect the Moscow area, along with other cities throughout the Russian Federation, as Ukraine launched a drone strike only mere hours ago that was able to cause significant damage to Russia's warfighting abilities, and also appears to have possibly landed a few direct hits within the Moscow city area. Moving us directly into Moscow at this moment, we were able to see that there was a multitude of videos that did come out from the Moscow city area and the Moscow air defense perimeter, showing us the presence of Ukrainian drones, the sounds and also explosions of Ukrainian drones making their way through the air defense perimeter and either getting shot down or hitting onto their targets. Here are some of the small snippets of clips that we were able to get out of the Moscow ring road perimeters, somewhere within the 3rd ring road. Moving on from that clip, we also have another clip here as well.
Sounds pretty spooky over Moscow.
Yeah, it actually sounds almost like some sort of like a growling animal out there. In the next clip, we also got to hear once again the sound of drones flying over the city, and also the sound of air defense possibly shooting one down, or an impact.
Блядь, прослушал опять. Блядь, не успел снять. Ебать там долбит. Ну.
That's the end of that clip, and our final clip out of this series before we move on into more footage of the Moscow attacks is this one. We once again hear the
That
sounds
was either a dog or a person.
I think that was a person, but we can hear the sound of explosions breaking the quiet of the Moscow night, once again letting us at least hear clear, visible proof that the city of Moscow was under attack at that time. We also have a couple of additional video clips as well, once again showing us more of the attacks that were going on around the Moscow ring road perimeter. We see right here what appears to be the moon, and the sound of a drone off in the distance, and some incredibly loud cicadas. We can also hear an explosion as well. Once again, another drone either being shot down or hitting a target close nearby. Outside of that, we once again have one last clip here, showing or letting us hear the sounds of the incoming Ukrainian drones.
Взорвали.
There was an explosion right over the horizon.
It makes you wonder how these drones are making it through all the way to the perimeter ring roads of Moscow these days, because, you know, there's always a ton of air defense around Moscow. So how they're getting through this time is it looks like they're getting quite close to the center of Moscow, at least on this attack.
They are getting incredibly close, at least at this moment. From what we generally understand, most if not all of the attacks that we saw so far were coming from somewhere right outside of the 3rd ring road perimeter, which means that it was in between the A107, which is this larger ring road that you see right here that my mouse cursor is moving around, and the inner road, the inner ring road, the MKAD, which makes up really the outer ring road of the interior of the most urbanly populated centers of the city of Moscow. From what we are generally understanding at the moment, the fact that these drones were able to make it to the outer ring of the Moscow air defense ring perimeter means that these drones flew around 300 miles uninterrupted through Russian Federation airspace to make it into this area of Moscow. From what we are generally understanding at the moment, the Moscow air defense perimeter is one that is one of the only well-fortified ones throughout the entirety of the country. And to give you all a little bit of an understanding of what we've been hearing or seeing at least so far, we have been able to see that Moscow's air defense ring perimeter is not exactly a ring. It is more so an outwards facing crescent, at least from what we've been able to see, and I'll explain all of the qualitative information and evidence that we have to largely suggest this. The Russian Federation has set up a system of air defense towers, which are largely these steel towers that have a Pantsir S-1 lifted on top of them, somewhere in between the 3rd and 4th ring road, most likely sitting around the area of Leningrad, Didovsk, Odintsovo, Podolsk, and then somewhere around the Domodedovo area and the Zhukovsky Airport. This is generally what we would call the main defense ring, or the main defense crescent, that is facing to the southern side of the city and is able to generally stop most of the Ukrainian drone attacks that are targeted towards the area. And I'll be highlighting that one at least here to explain what we've been seeing so far. However, as far as the attacks that we've ever seen being conducted against the capital city of Moscow over prior months and years, we have always noticed that there is a much higher success of Ukrainian drone impacts around the areas of the city of Pushkino, Shiolokovo, and other cities within the northeastern area of the city of Moscow. This is largely showing that while it would be believed that there is a circular air defense perimeter around the city of Moscow, this is not necessarily the case. It appears that it is more so a crescent in shape, and is only able to provide about a 15-mile defensive range, or maybe at its farthest a 20 or 25-mile defensive range from all ends of the main Pantsir air defense towers that have been set up to the southeastern, southern, and eastern sides of the city of Moscow. With this in mind, this is giving us a decent idea that if they have a 25-mile range, that would make complete sense as to why a lot of the Ukrainian drones that hit the northeastern region of Moscow at Pushkino and Shiolokovo are able to successfully land and strike their targets within that area, as it is actually directly outside of the maximum range of a Pantsir S-1's missile systems. Meaning, that's the reason why we see that almost all attacks in northeastern Moscow are wildly successful, while other attacks within the southeastern, eastern, and southern regions of the city of Moscow have some splotchy success rates, with only about 20 to 30% of the drones fired in this area of Moscow making it through and actually successfully hitting their targets. Of course, considering the heavy amount of air defense fire that we were seeing on the southeastern side of Moscow, the Domodedovo airport, which is directly within the air defense crescent on the southern side of the city, was shut down during the air attack. And we were also able to get some additional clips from the nearby area of the Domodedovo airport showing us the air raid sirens going off and some of the minimal air defense actions that were caught on film. To really quickly give you all an idea of the geography of this area, this is the Moscow Domodedovo Mikhail Lomonosov airport, which is a significant international airport for the Russian Federation's air access to the capital city of Moscow. Not too far over is the Zhukovsky International Airport, which is not as heavily used for commercial air traffic, but is still somewhat significant for the Russian Federation's air abilities around the city of Moscow. This video seems to have been filmed from the built-up areas of Domodedovo itself, most likely within the central area of the city, only miles away from the Domodedovo International Airport, and once again directly within the Moscow air defense perimeter, which is on the southern side of the city. And once again, here's the clip. That's the end of the air raid siren, but we also got an additional clip showing us that some sort of burning debris in a field nearby south of Domodedovo and incredibly close to the Domodedovo International Airport. Someone's just absolutely ripping out. Why? I don't know, but we can't see the fire. Also, let's watch this guy like pass the camera in like 5 frames again. Let's just watch that one more time. That guy was ripping up dirt. Like, he was legitimately ripping it, dude. Like, why? Why did he do that? I don't know. But he's gone.
It's like he took off, like he got caught doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. He peeled out.
Yeah, he peeled out. That video was filmed, by the way, folks, somewhere from one of the fields just outside of Domodedovo, within one of the smaller villages, most likely around a smaller village like Bityagovo, or maybe even Lyumtsino. We haven't been able to directly geolocate the exact area of this small field of burning debris, but it is somewhere on the very southern end of the Moscow Air Defense Crescent, which we were talking about just a moment ago. Also, another thing that I'd like to say really quickly for all of y'all is that as far as the air defense perimeter goes, this is the only one that we've been able to observe inside of the Russian Federation that is actually significant. The only other one that we've seen so far that could be considered a significant air defense perimeter would be the one around the Kerch Bridge, which technically is not inside of the Russian Federation, it's inside of occupied Ukraine. But this is the only other area in the entirety of the Russian Federation that we've been able to observe has a pretty reliable air defense perimeter around it that is generally able to intercept most, if not all, incoming air targets, meaning that the Kerch Bridge and the city of Moscow, at least facing southeasterly, are the only two areas in the Russian Federation that have any adequate air defense coverage in the entirety of the country. Outside of that, drone attacks are able to hit literally anywhere and generally get by with a high chance of success. Just to remind some of y'all of the strikes that we've seen around the Moscow area that were wildly successful, we were able to see strikes on Kaluga and Tula within the past month and a half that were incredibly successful in damaging and destroying factories that were vital to wartime production, and we also were able to see that Ukrainian drones also skirted around the Moscow air defense perimeter and struck just about 40 miles north of the city of Moscow in the town of Dubna, striking and destroying a major Russian drone assembly factory responsible for the production of the Geron 2 license-produced long-range drones, which are licensed copies of the Shahed 136 from the Islamic Republic of Iran. With this in mind, it's become increasingly clear, at least with this attack today, that the Moscow air defense perimeter, while being robust at least in one direction facing southeasterly, it is not robust in its full coverage. It does appear that you are able to circumvent and actually attack Moscow from its northeastern region, as the air defense systems are fighting at their maximum range at that point, and it appears that there's absolutely no significant air defense systems anywhere but the southeastern direction of the city of Moscow, meaning that it's actually not a full encompassing spherical air defense system. It is more so a half-assed air defense system, to put it the best way I could, instead of trying to use technical terminology. We were able to see outside of that, however, moving on over into Nizhny Novgorod, which is several hundred miles deeper into the Russian Federation, mind you, than what we've seen before. The city of Dzerzhinsk is actually 470 miles away from the nearest active Ukrainian border controlled by the state of Ukraine, while the city of Moscow's air defense perimeter is only about 270 miles away, meaning that the city of Dzerzhinsk is nearly 2 times the distance from the state of Ukraine than the city of Moscow. And we were able to see that within the area of the city of Dzerzhinsk, there was a significant amount of attacks striking critical infrastructure. The city of Dzerzhinsk is a little bit special, at least in its origins. The city of Dzerzhinsk is actually an extension of the city of Nizhny Novgorod, a fairly significant city in the Russian Federation for its population size, industrial abilities, and also its cultural and historic significance, as Nizhny Novgorod was actually one of the key founding states of what would later become the Russian Empire through the Duchy of Muscovy. As y'all may know, or may not know, Nizhny Novgorod and Muscovy actually united around the 1400s to create what would later be known as the modern-day Russians, or the Russian cultural group for the greater part. But beyond that, we were able to hear of these significant attacks that did occur in Dzerzhinsk. But before I start to bring y'all through the damage and impacts the Ukrainian drone attacks have had today on a lot of Russia's significant war industries in Nizhny Novgorod, Lipetsk, and the Voronezh oblasts, I do really quickly want to see what y'all are thinking right now about the significant Ukrainian drone attacks that have just occurred on Moscow only about a few hours ago. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so we did see that Moscow came under a very large and very severe Ukrainian drone attack today. We saw the footage just a moment ago. And the question is, will Ukraine escalate to missiles? So 56% said yes, Ukraine will escalate the Moscow attacks, while 22% said probably a mix of both is coming very soon, and 15% said no, drones will remain the main method of attack. And I believe what's going to happen is when Ukraine receives more weapons from the United States, within those shipments of weapons that are being sent to NATO countries and then on to Ukraine through the border, it's going to probably include some offensive weapons that Ukraine can use to strike all the way into Moscow. And I have a very strong feeling they probably will escalate these attacks, because not only does Ukraine want to do that, but now the U.S. officials are telling Ukraine, you should do that actually to change the face of the war and change it very quickly. You should attack Russia. That's what the U.S. officials are allegedly telling the Ukrainian officials right now, is to go on the offensive against the Russian Federation. So Obviously, that's a big change in the strategy by the United States, because before they were telling them to back off and negotiate a ceasefire. Now they're telling them to go to Russia and bring the pain to them. So it's a total shift all the way around. And honestly, it will probably change the face of the war quite a bit when that does happen. So it'll probably include a mix of both missiles and drones in the very near future. And that's going to cause Moscow to panic a little bit extra because their air defense isn't even stopping the drones, and it won't stop the missiles either. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my honest opinion, I would agree with the 56% as well. The Ukrainians are going to be escalating their attacks against Moscow and are most likely going to be using their gathered intelligence of Russia's air defense abilities around the capital to be able to strike more targets effectively than they have been able to in the past. From what we are generally understanding at the moment, the United States is having a tectonic shift in its the foreign policy position on the Russian Federation, and is now actually calling for the state of Ukraine to go out of its way to conduct major offensives against Russian land forces in occupied Ukraine, and not only that, to really bring the war to the Russians from this point on. The Ukrainians did state, we're getting all into this news here in just a little bit from now, but the Ukrainians did state that they would need more weapons to make that a reality, and it appears that the president also concurred and will be providing those weapons to them here in the near future. With all of that put together, it's pressingly clear that these sorts of attacks are going to become commonplace here in the near future, as the Ukrainian armed forces are going to be attempting to strike and destroy a lot of the main key targets in the Russian Federation, which are inside the city of Moscow. In terms of population figures alone, which are incredibly important when speaking about wartime conducting of activities, there are around 10 to 11 million people living inside of the city of Moscow. It actually encompasses 10% of the entire population in a singular city. The Russian population density map as a result of this looks insane. But outside of that whole rabbit hole, this is a significant city for its industrial abilities because of its population size, meaning that a lot of Russia's key military and industrial abilities can be found in the city of Moscow. If 10% of the Russian population is within this city, that means that you can guarantee that about roughly 10% of their military and industrial abilities are also going to be scattered about somewhere in the city or near to the outside surroundings of the city, meaning that any attacks directly on the city of Moscow will be incredibly pertinent and important for the Ukrainians to be able to destroy and greatly mitigate Russia's warfighting abilities and war industries that have currently been attempting to pummel the Ukrainians for 3.5 years. With this in mind, the Ukrainians will most likely be pressing forward more drone attacks against the city of Moscow in the hopes they'll be able to make it through the air defense perimeter and actually destroy the targets inside of Moscow once and for all. One thing that is interesting to note, however, is that considering that we are able to largely map out now Russia's available or usable air defense perimeter, the bigger question starts to come into play: what to do about it. These positions, let me go show you all this. Pantsir Air Defense Tower. Let me go find one of these for y'all really quickly and show this. Let's see here. So this may be one of the... Oh, here we go. There we are. So these are the towers that actually exist around Moscow. And they are simply steel scaffolds that have been erected that are able to support a significant weight of a fully loaded Pantsir S1 truck that is mounted on top of the scaffold. And this is the system that's actually mounted on top of those very scaffolds that you all just saw in the picture right there. These scaffolds are permanently fixed in place, and because these Pantsirs are lifted on top of these scaffolds and practically left there for an indefinite period of time, with the crews transiting a staircase up and down the scaffold to access the air defense system, this means that these are stationary air defense platforms, and these can be targeted and destroyed fairly easily if you're able to actually get to them. Now that's the big question, and therein lies the issue. How in the world are the Ukrainians going to target and destroy these air defense towers, or pretty much flak towers if you want to call them that, to be able to clear out Moscow's air defense perimeter and allow for a lot of their attacks to have a far greater range of success, somewhere near to the 80% margin? And the only way that I could explain that that could be done would be to allow the Ukrainians to use longer range munitions, such as the ATACMS, the Storm Shadow, or the Scalp EG, to directly target and destroy either the Pantsir on top of the scaffold scaffold or the actual supporting struts of the scaffold to pretty much bring it down while it's in operation. One of those sorts of actions, either one or the other, would be able to neutralize and pretty much destroy most, if not all, of the entirety of Moscow's air defense perimeter, as we are also starting to note, as the war has continued to progress and more data and information has come out about this perimeter, that there doesn't appear to be any heavy caliber air defense systems of the S-300 or S-400 varieties, or even the S-350, that are based around the city of Moscow. It appears to be solely Pantsir S-1 systems, with about a 25-mile range. So if you destroy those Pantsir S-1 systems, there's no other fallback air defense system available, at least at the moment, that will be able to protect Moscow, and it would leave the city completely open to future attacks by the Ukrainians that would probably have an 80% margin of success. Also, another thing is that if those air defense towers are destroyed, we will have to see that the Russians will either leave the city of Moscow open to attacks, or that they will have to draw other air defense systems, vital Pantsir S-1s, and other systems like the Tor M1 or the Tor M2 from the active front lines in Ukraine to be able to rebuild the air defense perimeter around the city of Moscow from the ground up. Or they may also have to relocate other vital S-300 and S-400 systems, which are very limited and few in number, once again, around the Moscow area to try and protect against future incoming attacks. Either way, the main issue posed at the moment for Ukrainian attacks on Moscow are these very air defense towers. If they are destroyed, or the air defense systems are destroyed on top of them, Russia's air defense range is going to be greatly limited if they have to operate these systems from the ground itself, or if they don't have any systems around the city at all. So we will generally have to wait and see if the Ukrainians will ever get the ability or give permission to use their abilities to strike and destroy the air defense towers, because this probably is, at the moment, the #1 roadblock to Ukraine's successful strikes and destruction of war industry and military forces of the Russian Federation currently holed up in the city of Moscow. Outside of that, however, we have been able to hear of other major attacks that the Ukrainians have conducted inside of Nizhny Novgorod, moving us right back into the city of Dzerzhinsk. Dzerzhinsk is largely an extension of Nizhny Novgorod. A decent amount of the citizens of the city of Dzerzhinsk largely commute to Nizhny Novgorod on a near day-to-day basis through the railroad system that exists within this localized area to actually gain access to most of the commodities or other sorts of commercial services that are not provided inside of Dzerzhinsk. Dzerzhinsk is largely an industrial town through and through, and you can see that most of the city's area is actually encompassed by larger wartime industrial concerns such as this one, which are responsible for the production of war materials that help the Russian Federation to keep their military fighting inside of Ukraine. Not only that, there is also a older ammunition storage depot. It is, from what we generally understand, not a Grau arsenal. It is right next near to being a Grau arsenal, but it is not exactly a Grau arsenal. It's a designation slightly less than that. But it is a significant area for Russian military activities and war industry. And we were able to see that the Ukrainians did successfully attack Nizhny Novgorod throughout the course of the night, and were able to hit vital targets within the area. And here are some of the clips showing that action.
Ебать!
It's always funny to hear that the Russians are always excited to hear that their war industry is getting destroyed.
That scream that guy just did sounded just like that Tom and Jerry thing when the cat would get hit by a shovel in the face. So it'd go, ah! It would literally be the exact same laugh.
And there was another hit at the end of that clip as well. And here are some more clips of the Ukrainian drones that were flying into Dzerzhinsk throughout the morning. That is a Liudi.
Oh, wow, is that new? Yeah, that's that new one, isn't it? That new drone?
Actually, I think that one might just be a normal Liudi, because the Liudis have been used for about 2 years now, and is pretty much the backbone of most Ukrainian long-range attacks. Let me go and actually pull up the Liudi drone. Here we go. Ah, yes, the Liudi. Hold up, let me get a picture of this for all of y'all. That right there that we're seeing in the clip is the, oh, hang on. I actually didn't close down the window. Sorry, everyone. I thought I did. But this is the Liudi, which is a Ukrainian long-range drone. These actually aren't small. This is how big they really are.
Interesting. Yeah, the reason why I thought it was a new one is it looked like the wingspan was longer and the one that we saw in that video flying over the sky, but I guess it could be the same. Maybe it's just a perspective issue.
Maybe it might be a perspective issue, possibly. It was very grainy footage. But this is the Liudi. The Liudi actually has a significant explosive yield, and it's always a little bit misleading to see these things on film, because they always look small on film. They always look like some sort of a smaller recon drone, like a Koksan or something along those lines, or a Corsair. But these are actually much larger. They are pretty much the size of a Bayraktar, and they are actually domestically produced inside of Ukraine, interestingly enough, as well. Showing that the Ukrainians do have the ability to mass produce fairly high quality kamikaze drones that also have significant range. But outside of that, these were the drones that we largely saw attacking the Derzhansk area, and we were also able to see that in this clip as well. And there goes another.
They certainly didn't make them quiet, that's for sure. That thing is loud. Probably not enough room for a muffler on there, because it's a very compact space where they put the engine on the rear.
Yeah, and I don't really think they're EPA compliant. Nevertheless, we were able to hear that there were impacts inside the city of Derzhansk, which we were also able to see in this clip right here. We can see the smoke rising from one of the Liudi drones that did successfully impact some sort of an industrial site within the northern area of the city of Derzhansk. This is confirming that war industry within the area has been hit, as all of the war industry is within the northern area. And also, if you ever needed any extra confirmation that this was in Derzhansk, you can actually see right there on that building, that's a train station, mind you. What does that say, Matthew, in Cyrillic? That says Derzhansk. It's the city of Derzhansk. And really quickly, I can actually show y'all where that station is. It's this one right here. Let's see here.
Interesting.
Let me try and get y'all a picture from the backside so that way we can have it line up. Let's see here. Eventually we'll get a good picture. Here we go. There we are. You see that right there? You see that little white stripe on the building, the bold red text? Same building that's seen right there. Once again, the white line going right through the text, bold red lettering. This is the exact train station inside of Derzhansk that this drone flew over. And considering that it was flying directly down the tracks, which I'm guessing it used to guide its way into the city, this one actually appears to have been going for some of the industrial concerns farther east to the eastern side of the plant, the eastern side of the city, which are also important for war industry production purposes. But we can see this drone flying directly over the train station. Now, that certainly is not a Liudi, though.
Yeah, it looks like it. I think we went over the one that this was last time, or like a few weeks back or something. It looks like it's going in reverse, but it's really going the right way forward. But I can't remember the name of the drone, though, but I recognize the shape of it.
Yeah, like, I unfortunately, I don't know the name of this thing either. Like, I was sitting there thinking about that. I was like, I don't know. Also, Matthew, look, you can actually see the schedule and all the trains coming into the station when it was getting attacked. So if y'all really wanted to, in case if y'all don't know, all of the Russian trains' timetables and schedules and the trains that ran are cataloged online. You could actually go onto the Russian State Railways website and pull up all of these trains at the Derzhansk station and find out the exact moment in time, at least down to about a 10-minute window, that the drone flew over by the amount of trains and the types of trains that were soon to be arriving and departing from the station. So you can, like, if you really wanted to get in depth on the whole geolocating and, you know, all of that sort of thing, this video right here is probably the most important trove of intelligence that you could get, because one, the building did confirm at the beginning of the clip we're in Derzhansk. Two, this timetable board right here is actually showing us the very times of day. Like, this occurred right here at around just a little bit before 0500 hours, as the next train to arrive at the station arrives at 0500. So this is going to be about 10 to 15 minutes before 0500. So about 4:45 in the morning.
Interesting. Also, by the way, I did the research and also I got some tips from people in the chat. That is a UJ-26 Bober, also known as the Beaver, right there. So leaving the Beaver, he's heading in to take care of the whole situation.
Man, isn't that like that Polish guy in that video, man, who found that beaver? And he was like, Boberkowa, Bedlo, did it? You know the guy I'm talking about, man? He like picked up the beaver and like it had like the crazy looking eyes and it looked really confused. And, like, that's the drone. Boberkowa. You know, it's like, but anyways, there it goes. And we can also see the confirmed impacts in the distance after that clip as well. And also, really quickly, in that little picture right there, you can actually see the columns of the smokestacks of these two factories right here, or the two smokestacks in this one factory. You can line those up right there. And given that, if we come over here, there should be a larger apartment building that is right there. And it has a very distinct shape. And it's this one right here, actually. So it appears that this camera person was somewhere within central Dzerzhinsk, looking towards the southeastern direction, towards this factory. And from what we could tell, the smoke plume, which is about right there, actually came from further down. So we would be able to assume that it came from somewhere within this factory area, although there appears to be a decent amount of industries and factories that are directly along the trackside area. So it could have come from anywhere within this area. We can't really tell for certain beyond that in detail. Just to give you all a little bit of the geolocations of these clips and pictures that we're seeing that are doubly confirmed at this point to be out of Dzerzhinsk. And there's our last picture, once again, of the smoke rising from one of the hits on the factories east of the city of Dzerzhinsk, as well as the confirmation of the hits on the military industries north of Dzerzhinsk as well. So it appears that a lot of the significant industries within the Dzerzhinsk city area were targeted and hit by the Ukrainian drone attacks today. Outside of that, we also were able to confirm further Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian cities closer to the Ukrainian border, including the city of Lipetsk, which we were able to hear was hit by Ukrainian drone attacks overnight. And here's the clip.
They got that old school air raid siren.
Man, they got that "It's Chernobyl, run for your life" siren. Moving on from that clip in Lipetsk, because we didn't get any videos of the actual hits. We were able to hear of hits happening later, but we don't have any video or picture evidence to confirm the hits, so we're going to hold off on speaking about those for now. But in the area of Voronezh, we also were able to hear of explosions happening in the Voronezh city region, in this clip right here.
This was a really widespread attack, actually. Like that, it's really crazy how it's becoming like a daily occurrence at this point. I think we were discussing that before the stream began, that Ukraine is doing this on almost a daily basis. Now, the attacks on Moscow near the ring perimeter, that is a little bit more unusual, but even the attacks on Moscow are not as rare as they used to be. So it's really showing they're escalating it. And like I said, the missiles are probably going to be next as the U.S. starts sending them more equipment. But it really is crazy to see it daily.
It really is crazy to see this sort of a thing daily. And to be entirely honest with y'all, with the amount of drones that are airborne nightly at this point being launched by the Russians and the Ukrainians, it's getting back into the sort of world that we used to live in before missile warfare or modernized precision warfare became a thing, which are mass bombing campaigns like we would have seen during the Blitz in 1940, where the Germans were bombing major cities like London, and then the British were bombing Berlin right back in return. Those sorts of things are becoming incredibly common because most modern air defense systems are simply not built to be able to deal with these sorts of drones flying at lower altitudes, and you have to build a special kind of infrastructure like the Russian air defense towers to be able to deal with them. It is something to note. For that reason, a lot of modern air combat is starting to return back to what could be described as almost World War II in era. Gun-based air defense systems, machine guns, heavy caliber anti-aircraft guns, firing into the sky at night, illuminating the sky with tracers and the burst of flat cannon rounds, the small drones and the whirs of the propellers flying on in, kind of like bombers and fighters of 80 years ago as they try and hit their targets throughout the country. It's a pretty crazy kind of a thing to see and really think about like that modern air war is starting to revert back to what it was nearly 80 years ago, to be entirely honest, except for the part of the dogfight. The dogfight's still completely dead, but outside of that, at least for the bombing campaign side of it, it's returned back to World War II. But beyond that, these attacks throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation are quite significant, and they are also coming on the wave of a fairly significant announcement that was made today. We have been able to hear that the president has had a list, the president has had an itinerary of items that he has wanted to achieve in the foreign policy direction that would be beneficial to the United States of America. I'm sorry, folks, there's actually no such thing as a word called list. Shopping list? Forget it. It's a shopping lisp. And so, moving on into the news that we were able to hear, we did hear that the President of the United States apparently has some sort of ambition to see that the state of Ukraine somehow starts to bring the conflict to the Russians. In a 4th of July call with Zelensky, which was actually a little while ago, but we're only hearing of the specific details of the call today, the President of the United States said that Ukraine would not change the course of the war by playing defense and needed to go on the offensive. When the President asked if Ukraine could bomb Moscow or St. Petersburg, the official said that that Zelensky replied, "If we have the right weapons, we can," largely suggesting that if the President of the United States gives Ukraine the guns, missiles, and munitions, the Ukrainians will be able to make true on their promise of making Moscow and St. Petersburg Ashen Cinder. And so it does appear that at the moment, the President of the United States is starting to have a shift in thinking. A significant shift, mind you all, in thinking at the moment on what could be going on out there in the world at large. And of course, there are a lot of things that we could itinerary off. There's no such thing as the word list, folks. Forget it. There's a lot of loser degenerates that came up with this grand conspiracy theory of this stupid English word that just never existed, and they call it a list. And I think the list stands for limp idiots suggesting stupidity. But beyond that, it does appear that a lot of people have been talking about the shift in the administration's thinking on Ukraine. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So unfortunately, we've not getting to see the Ukrainians' wish list just yet, but we do know the Ukrainians do want some.
There is no list.
Yes. We have heard the Ukrainians do want some more advanced weapons, and apparently they might be getting them very soon. And the U.S. officials allegedly told Ukraine to go on the offensive to change the war and attack Russia. And is it a wise move? 61% said yes, the shift is long overdue, while 21% said no, the U.S. should not say that, and 11% said I'm 50-50 on this move. And I would say that this shift is long overdue because, like I mentioned earlier, the previous U.S. position on this entire situation was to negotiate a peace at all costs, appease Putin, and basically let the Ukrainians get slaughtered. That was the previous plan, and that was a terrible plan, if you can even call that a plan at all. So now we're actually shifting like a boomerang back to the other end of the spectrum, which is to go all in on Putin and bring the pain to him. So honestly, hopefully they don't go overboard. Like I am hoping they don't go overboard on it because there is a acceptable level of attacking Russia without going and causing a massive escalation. So hopefully there is a little bit of a limit there because we don't want to start World War III like right off the bat. But of course, I think now that Ukraine's getting these more advanced weapons and more advanced missiles, they probably will be launching long-range attacks into Russia, probably including Moscow as well, now that they get access to those weapons. So I think it is a wise move. I think the shift is long overdue, and I'm with the 60%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 60% as well. I think that the shift is long overdue, and I believe this should have been the original approach by the current administration on the Russian Federation. It's been incredibly clear over the past 3.5 years the Russian Federation does not pursue peace in an actual honest means or an honest way, and for that reason, we have to approach it with that kind of understanding in mind. For that particular reason, I believe that it's incredibly important that the United States supports Ukraine's offensive efforts against the Russian Federation and helps the state of Ukraine to continue to whittle away at Russia's economy and war industry and their armed forces in the field to completely render the Russians a non-substantive threat for the rest of Eastern Europe and the state of Ukraine and the United States of America into the foreseeable future. That would generally be my belief at the moment, and so I would have to say that the shift is long overdue, but hopefully they don't go overboard. It is a little interesting to note, folks, that this shift, this rapid shift, is coming at the same time as something else. Like not trying to suggest that they're correlated or anything, but it is quite bizarre to say the least. It's possibly suggesting that there is another motive at play, to maybe try and start to make a larger event happen outside of the United States to distract from a issue within. Maybe.
It could be, but I think the part of it that might actually sort of make that theory not really hold as much water is the president came out and refuted the claim that he told Ukraine to go and attack Russia. Now, the report where we're getting that from is allegedly from I can't remember which outlet it's from. It's from one of the main mainstream outlets. They're claiming that in private, Zelensky was told to attack Russia, but in the public, though, the president is denying that and saying that he never said that. which of course he could just be covering up for what he actually told Zelensky. That could be the case as well. Whatever the case is, though, I think it is wise to at least publicly state that we did not tell Ukraine to attack Russia in deep strikes, because that's, unnecessarily escalatory. We don't need to say that in the public. We can simply tell Ukraine that in the private and let that be basically it. And don't go, like beyond closed doors, start telling Russia we're telling them to attack Moscow. That would be really senseless and reckless and stupid to do that in the public. So that's the story, at least.
Matthew, we shan't forget. We shall not forget, folks, here on this channel, a little subchapter of the Ukraine war that happened here in America that so many of y'all may have forgotten about. And I'm going to tell y'all the words that will activate all of y'all like sleeper cells. Thug Shaker Central. Y'all remember them? You remember Thug Shaker Central? Remember, just to quickly say this for everyone. Remember when and I'm gonna have to say the names really quickly to line everything up so that way I can guide y'all through the analysis side of things here really quickly. Y'all remember when Biden, back at the beginning of the war, when it started in 2022 and 2023, he said, we're absolutely never going to support Ukrainian offensive actions into the Russian Federation. That simply is never going to happen. And then in the middle part of 2023, just a few months before the Wagner coup, Thug Shaker Central released a classified intelligence brief that actually showed that the United States of America was supporting and sponsoring forces of Russian nationals inside of Ukraine through the Ukrainian government and arming them to prepare for offensives into the Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod oblasts to be able to try and pretty much take territory in the Russian Federation to inevitably or eventually create a territory for territory exchange, or at least to divert a great deal of Russian forces back into Russian territory in defensive battles. Once that came out from Thug Shaker Central, Thug Shaker was thrown in prison, where he's still shaking the thug to this day. And outside of that, we have also been able to see that since then, the very things that document that was released said was going to happen actually did happen. And they did not change the plans. The Ukrainians didn't either. And they went forward with their offensive actions into the Kursk Oblast, Bryansk, and Belgorod through the Free Russian Army, the Russian Volunteer Corps, and then eventually the Ukrainian army itself inside the Kursk Oblast. That made it incredibly clear that while President Biden, just speaking about the last administration and their prior statements, openly lied about never supporting the Ukrainians in any offensive actions in the Russian Federation, in the background, they were. And they were actually arming these people, because if y'all remember as well, the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Free Russian Army looked like the U.S. Army in the amount of equipment that they had. They had Humvees, Strykers, really any sort of a lighter U.S. transport that could be imagined, along with U.S. weapon systems such as Javelins, M4 carbines, and the like. They had them all. And then the Ukrainian army that went into the Kursk Oblast also used the 47th Magura, which is one of the most modern and American-equipped brigades inside the entirety of the Ukrainian army. Once again, making it incredibly clear that at every level, the prior administration, while openly saying that they were never going to support offensive action against the Russians in Ukraine, were. And that means that the current administration under Trump is highly likely doing the very same thing. Just because an official says something, folks, does not mean that it's true. It's a little bit shocking to some people, but politicians lie, and they lie a great deal. And I generally assume that at this moment, you could bet your boots that the current administration is lying about their statements that they've made to the president of Ukraine. While they're saying,
but it's a good lie. But it's a good
lie,
lie, though. Like, because the prior administration did the right thing on that front. I don't think that was cowardly whatsoever for them to at least pretend, like in the public, that they did not endorse deep strikes into Russia, because I see folks in the chat saying that we should publicly endorse that. There's just no productive advantage to doing that. There's no productive side of that at all, in my opinion. Rather than letting the Russians know basically a big middle finger and tell them basically F off by doing that, all it's going to do is escalate things dramatically, and we're not trying to cause World War III. We're trying to prevent it. So we don't want to go so overboard with basically antagonizing Russia on purpose that they have a justification to start doing something wild like attacking the Baltics. We want to try to hold that off as long as possible and try to grind down the Russian economy so that way they collapse first instead of starting a war first.
Yes, that I would agree. And also, really quickly, I do have to get to that end point. The lie is a good lie, and there is no value that's served in telling the honest truth of what we're planning and doing with the Ukrainians. But outside of that, I do want to have y'all all under the understanding that while the president is saying that he is not openly supporting Ukrainian attacks against Moscow and St. Petersburg, the reality is that he most likely is, and they're quietly already working towards that in the background, and have pretty much already given the Ukrainians the letter of marque necessary to be able to go and take those actions if they wanted to. So that's generally what I would say at this point. with what we're seeing right now, because it's more and more clear, at least at the moment, that the president of the United States is starting to largely do a 180 on the whole Ukraine war and what's been going on with it so far. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. I hope that also gives you all a little bit of a historical analysis as to what the prior administration did, which is literally step for step what the current administration is doing right now. And also another thing, just really quickly to tell y'all, another thing that will tell y'all that we're right, because this is a easy way to see that we're right, because just to say this, the current president's really predictable in their responses. If we are right, they're going to come out, well, he's going to come out, and if a whole bunch of people start to echo or mirror those sorts of statements, he's going to say something along the lines of, these people are liars, they've never been credible, don't believe a word that they're saying, and, they're full of shit. That's pretty much what he's going to say. And then that's when you'll know that it's pretty much dead on the nail. That's actually what's happening, because generally, as far as the current answers on anything that ends up being the lid's kind of blown off of it because it's obvious, generally the response isn't just to ignore it and treat it like it's so uncredible it's not even worth addressing. Generally it's addressed in such an aggressive way that it makes it incredibly clear that that is the case, and they're trying to literally browbeat anyone who's saying that truly is what it is, calling a spade for the large part. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least at the moment right now, and we'll have to wait and see what happens with the Ukrainians. But I'm fairly adamant that we're going to see some pretty heavy attacks by the Ukrainians against Moscow, possibly even with U.S.-provided weaponry. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And it is also time for us to move on. Speaking of that American-Russian news, or really the Ukraine war news, it's also time for us to move on down into the Middle East, because we've actually gotten a lot of news that has come out of the Middle East over just the past few hours, for the large part. Actually, a lot over the past 24 hours, as a matter of fact. There has been a million developments that's been going on down in this area, and we want to make sure to get you all up to date on what's going on right now in between the Syrian tribal armies and those of the Syrian Druze rebels. And moving us on down into the Middle East, we have been able to see that earlier on in the day, heavy fighting was still breaking out around the entirety of As-Suwaida city. Here are some of the videos of the fighting, and also all of the people that you see in this clip we are generally believing, or at least assuming at this point, are a part of the Syrian Free Army. Oh, actually the Syrian Tribal Army, correction there. But before we get into that, I also want to make sure that we address another question that's been asked of all of you kind people. And so Matthew, what are people thinking, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So on the same line of discussion we were just on a moment ago, I asked this question out of public demand. So the question says, should the U.S. go public with endorsing deep strikes into Russia using new NATO-provided weapons? And shockingly, 48% said yes, go public to scare Putin, while 44% said no, let's keep the escalation under control. Now, this is a little bit of a surprising result here, because I really just do not see the value in going public with it, because I get the fact that people want to really stick it to Putin. Like, I understand that motive behind it. But outside of that, though, what does the U.S. and NATO stand to gain from doing that? Because Ukraine's going to automatically strike Russia very deep behind their lines automatically. They've gotten private endorsement to do that already from NATO, and they're going to do it anyway. So what is really the point of going that extra step to tell Putin in the public, so that way now the Russian people get tied in and dragged into it as well, that Russia is going to be basically flattened using these new NATO-provided weapons? That gives Putin every justification in the world to start escalating wildly, which is not something we want. So I'm going to be with the 45%. I say keep escalation under control. This is the perfect scenario here to sort of manage escalation a bit. And this is one of the rare instances when it really should be adhered to closely. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that, in my opinion, I would also have to agree that we should keep escalation under control. So I'd have to agree with the 44%. And I believe that we should generally lie about it. Openly stating our intentions does not do us well in the long run on every single situation. At least on the general premise of we are anti-Chinese or anti-Russian, those are generally statements that actually are pretty good for us to put out there and make it incredibly public. But as far as the actions we are actually taking to curb Russian or Chinese influence in the world, it's not always a good thing to go out there and brazenly say it. It feels good to say it, but it doesn't serve us any well because that also gives them a justification to say, because of these actions that they are taking that are A, B, and C that they have clearly laid out even by their own public statements, we are going to be taking these following actions, A, B, and C, which could end up escalating things rapidly. For this reason, it's a lot better for us to keep these things under the rug or under the table, if you want to put it that way. So that way we make sure not to make it such a publicly, openly noted thing that it can be directly responded to on a global foreign policy setting, because that can end up becoming a pretty bad sort of a deal in the long run for U.S. foreign policy planning and the execution of our plans to continue to put our rivals and adversaries generally 6 feet under eventually. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, because I would generally also have to be in the camp with everyone else in the 44% that would not really be the wisest idea to go out there and just publicly and openly state exactly what we're doing to screw over the Russians. Because, one of the big things that Russia has been saying is that NATO, this is a war against NATO. NATO is striking Moscow, St. Petersburg, Voronezh, Kursk, all so on and so forth. They keep saying things like that, but there's no clear proof because the U.S. has never stated, we're giving Ukraine weapons with the intent of blowing up stuff in Moscow. We've never publicly said that. So while they're saying that in Russia, they don't have anything to grab onto as clear, worded diplomatic evidence to be able to respond to it directly. If we say we're giving the Ukrainians ATACMS to blow away Putin's goofy-looking ass in the Kremlin, they're going to go, oh, God, look at that. They're actually at war with us now. NATO is actually providing weapons to kill our leaders or something along those lines for A, B, and C reasons. We're going to respond now by actually preparing to really go to war with NATO, and then that could end up becoming a whole issue in itself. So I hope that y'all see, at least by the explanation I'm trying to give, it's not always the best idea to go out there and publicly state exactly what's going to be going on and exactly what's going to be happening every single time. It's good sometimes, but not all the time. And so with that, I hope that this addressed it the best I can. And before we move on into the rest of our news, especially inside the Middle East, Ukraine, and East Asia, I do want to make sure that we get a couple of questions here from the chat. And I also have to say a big thanks to everyone who's been watching tonight. We actually had 15.5 thousand people here at the peak again tonight, and I've just got to say that we are entirely appreciative and thankful that all of y'all continue to spend your time here on this channel. If y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to subscribe. We'd love to have y'all here every single day, and we'd love to make sure that y'all join us here, at least for a while, maybe a long time perhaps, here on the Enforcer channel. Y'all know that we appreciate having y'all here, so just hit that subscribe button and make yourself at home. But nevertheless, it is time for us to move on into some questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of the night. This one goes to Snow White, a channel legend. And thank you very much, Snow White, for that very generous $100 support for the largest super chat of the night. And Snow White said, shortly after your memo about reaction to explosives, I hear them going off at bases near me. Spooky. And I guess after the 4th of July, the real experts take over and pick a cool question from the chat.
Hey, and I thank you so much for the incredible massive support, Snow White. And I got to say that it's always like that after the 4th of July. You always hear a lot of fireworks after the 4th of July for days. And I gotta thank you incredibly for the support. But it is an interesting thing, to say the least. And I guess the real experts do take over after the 4th of July. It's true after all. Everyone who got their fingers blown off on the 4th of July because they held a firecracker for too long aren't around to be the experts of the 5th of July. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, Snow White. And we will make sure to get a live chat in your honor. So Matthew, what do we happen to have?
All right, so our live chat question is going to go to Pireway Productions, and he said, do y'all see an end to the war this year? And not in Ukraine, I don't. Personally, I don't see the war ending this year at all. In fact, Russia's economy might collapse first, but even when it collapses, it's not going to happen this year. It's probably going to be at least a year or two down the road before the Russian economy truly actually collapses to the point where Putin's in deep trouble politically. So I don't see it ending this year. Russia's already ramping up for another massive offensive this summer, coming up in a couple of weeks, and Ukraine is getting more weapons from NATO and now getting a plenty of support from the new U.S. administration. So this thing is gearing up to be a multi-year long war, even longer than it currently has gone so far. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that from what I've been able to hear, could you reread that question? Oh, actually, I saw it right there. Pirate. Do you see an end to the war this year? No. The war is going to be going on a good while longer, even from now. If the Russian economy is in a state of collapse at the moment, it is still going to take a while for their economy to completely implode. It doesn't happen overnight. It usually happens over the course of multiple years. So I would say that about another year or two, and we could see that this war ends. But as far as the war in Ukraine is going, it is going to be a fairly lengthy war. It might end up being, funnily enough, by the end of the conflict, as long as World War II was in its full length from, well, its full length is debated. Some people say it started in 1936. Some people say it started in 1939. I generally go with the people who say that it started in 1939. But if you were to measure that from 1939 to 1945, that took about roughly the 5.5 years or so for it to end. And I think that the Ukraine war could actually go on to be about 5 or 5.5 years long by the time it actually concludes. So in my honest opinion, I do not think that the war in Ukraine is going to be ending this year. There is no frontline collapse at the moment that is showing that the Russians are being pushed out or the Ukrainians are about to, end as a state. There is no economic collapse that's happened that is so rapid or so severe that it would pretty much jumble up the entirety of the innards of Russia and pretty much force them into domestic upheaval immediately. Those sorts of things haven't happened yet right now. And if they haven't happened yet right now and there's no clear signs they're about to happen, they're going to be happening sometime in next year or the year after that. So I hope that does address it the best I can, because in my honest opinion, the war in Ukraine isn't going to be ending anytime soon. So on our end, whether it's a good thing or not, we're going to be in business talking about the war in Ukraine for a good time longer than now. But a big thanks to you so much once again, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Old Warrior, who's also another channel legend, and he throws in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Mr. Old Warrior, for that support as well. He said,
Hey!
as with the poll, it's easy to know what's best for someone else when it's they who must live with the consequences, and they have been at war longer than we did in World War II, and they must decide. And if you're referring to that last poll that we just ran there, the one that was about, was it the last poll he's referring to? I can't recall.
I'm not really sure actually.
So if it was the last poll that he was referring to right there, I would personally say that it's really kind of hard to tell. Honestly, in my opinion, I would say, generally speaking, though, we probably shouldn't go out as the United States and start broadcasting what we're about to do, or at least what we're telling Ukraine to do in private, if you're referring to that last poll. But that's really just a personal preference thing. In the end, if the U.S. went out and said that we're giving Ukraine permission to deep strike, it could maybe not change anything, but it just gives like a really big risk for Putin to escalate, at least in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I thank you for the support, Old Warrior, the massive support, by the way, and being an old Garnet Channel legend. And I generally would say that to some extent, it really is the Ukrainians to have to decide what they want to do. But at the same time, if we're providing them the weapons, we have a say in how they use those weapons, because we have that say in any country, anywhere in the world where our weapons are at the moment. So while I would understand that to some degree, especially with their own weaponry, we can't tell them squat to do with their own weaponry because it's theirs. We had no involvement in giving that to them or helping to furnish them or build those systems at all. But outside of that, if it's our weaponry, we generally do have a say. But outside of that as well, speaking about directly publicly stating that, it's just not a good idea to directly or publicly state that we are going to be allowing the Ukrainians to deep strike inside of Russia. It allows the Russians to make an actual response to something that is a fact. If the Ukrainians just happen to hit Moscow with an ATACMS and we never gave them clear permission, the Russians are scratching their heads. If we say the Ukrainians have permission to hit Moscow with an ATACMS and then the Ukrainians hit Moscow with an ATACMS, then the Russians have the grounds to say, the West is directly attacking us and using Ukraine as a proxy. It's incredibly clear because they already said so out of their own mouths, and we have clear proof to show. And for that reason, we're going to war with NATO, because this is more so a war with NATO than it is with Ukraine at this point. And then we've ended up creating a third world war scenario because we just wanted to openly state something that we were already going to do. And so it'd be better to leave them guessing, in my opinion, than it would be to leave them not guessing and knowing exactly what our next moves and actions are and what we're telling the Ukrainians they can and can't do with our weaponry. But a big thanks to you for the support, Old Warrior, and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that.
Also, by the way, Old Warrior's referring apparently to the first poll. He asked, because I asked him, I said, were you referring to the one talking about the deep strikes, the U.S. announcement? He said, no, it's the previous one. So the first one we ran, if I recall correctly, was the one about using missiles on Moscow, I believe, or using missiles to deep strike inside of Ukraine, because now we're seeing the drone attacks. Say what?
I think it was the one before that talking about conducting offensives. You know, like the president saying y'all need to conduct some ground offensives and take some ground back, or hit Moscow or St. Petersburg or something. Just go on the offensive. I think he's talking about that one.
Interesting. I don't recall running a poll on that, but I'll let you run with it.
Well, remember it was the first poll you ran. It was the one about the statement the president made to Zelensky. And it was about, you know, we need weapons, you know, go on the offensive, hit Moscow, hit St. Petersburg. It was that poll.
I think that was the last one I just ran. But the first one I ran, though, was generally speaking about whether or not, you know, with the new weapon shipments going to Ukraine, that Ukraine's going to use drones, missiles, or a combination of both to strike into Moscow. If that's the one he's referring to, which at this point I'm not really sure.
Well, there was a poll at some point that you ran that was talking about are the Ukrainians going to ramp up offensives? And Old Warrior said that's it. That's the one I'm talking about. Like you ran that poll. That was like the first one you ran. It was about the Ukrainians upping the attacks, and you specifically spoke about the president wanting them to go on the offensive. And you said as a result of them going on the offensive, they're going to start striking Moscow or St. Petersburg farther or more. And that's the poll that I think Old Warrior is asking about, and it looks like it is. So to answer that one, because to be entirely honest, it took a lot of raking in my brain to even think of that one too, because to be honest with y'all folks, everything's a blur on air. Once we do something, we're moving on. We don't really think a lot in reverse. We're always thinking about what's coming up ahead and forwards. But to answer the question on that, I would say that is true, Old Warrior. We shouldn't really be telling them how to fight the war, because if they want to be on the defensive, it's largely their prerogative to be on the defensive. If they want to be on the offensive, then it's their prerogative to be on the offensive. It is a little bit hard to say, at least, apparently it was our second poll, first poll, I'm not entirely sure at this point, but it's not really our prerogative. I would largely agree to tell the Ukrainians what their general war strategy should be, because what if Ukraine knows that they're starting to run out of reinforcements or conscriptable population numbers, and if they go on the offensives, they could be wasting valuable manpower that they won't have for later when they have to be on the defensive. Or what if, for example, there are other exigencies that the Ukrainians are thinking of that the United States is not thinking of at the moment, because the United States is thinking more so on possibly a political level, which, you know, not to say that they are, but what if they were? Those sorts of things are a bit of an issue, Old Warrior. I would have to agree. And so on that side of things, I would certainly agree with you. Now that I know which poll you're talking about, I would certainly agree with you on that. I don't really think the United States has a responsibility to tell the Ukrainians whether their general stance should be offensive or defensive on a general notion of what they're doing in the war. So with that,
Although it gave Ukraine a chance to finally say, well, look, we need weapons to actually pull that off, because I think that shows kind of how, I'm not trying to insult here, and that's not my intent behind it, but kind of inept the U.S. leadership right now is about the current situation in Ukraine, because for them just to simply say in private, Zelensky, how come you've not gone on the offensive? It's like, well, I mean, you've not been giving them weapons. I mean, that's pretty obvious. That's probably why they're not going on the offensive. They're trying to conserve their ammo. They're trying to build up defensive lines so that way Russia doesn't get the jump on them and start taking more of their territory. So Zelensky had the opportunity to say, like he did, that we can't really attack without those weapons. So if you give us the right weapons, we can do what you're asking. And then the president, I assume, he went, is that right? I'm shocked by that, because, you know, he doesn't really know the on-the-ground situation out there. But whatever the case is, though, Ukraine should decide for themselves, but Ukraine does need weapons, though. So it's a push and pull thing, like the enforcer's also alluding to. It's kind of like a push and pull. Ukraine has to kind of, you know, play the game a little bit, and the U.S. has to pretend like they know what they're talking about when sometimes we don't. So it is what it is, honestly.
Yeah, that's true. I would also have to agree with Matthew on that one. It is a decent bit of ineptitude, at least from a governmental position. to sit there and go, no weapons to Ukraine for a couple of months, and then go, wow, why aren't y'all on the offensive? Why don't you use some weapons or shoot them or something? It's like, oh, they are almost out of ammo. It's like that might be the reason why they're on the defensive right now. So I would generally have to say that I'd agree with Enforcer Matt on that point entirely, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense to be generally against supporting the state of Ukraine and quite truly drip feeding them support for about the past half year, and then asking the question why they're not on the offensive. That's like going up to a homeless person and telling them that to be homeless, to not be homeless, they just simply need to buy a house. Like that's kind of like the same sort of an approach to that as we're seeing right now. Is why are you not on the offensive? Just simply shoot them instead of focusing on everything else in between that goes into loading the guns and then going on the offensive and hopping in a trench and blasting a couple of Russians. It's like there's a lot that goes into that before that actually gets to that point. So, kind of a bit, that's kind of where the issue lies. And then, honestly, Matthew, that's kind of what Zelensky said. The president was like, what's wrong, Zelensky? You're homeless? Just buy a house. And Zelensky was like, well, I kind of need money to, be able to buy a house, that might be a little nice. It's kind of
somebody saying, oh, or somebody goes to somebody, I need a car to go to work. I have no way to get to work. And then the person turns around and is like, oh, why don't you just buy a car to get to work? Well, I'm kind of poor. I need to go work because I'm kind of poor. I can't afford a car. Well, stupid. You should have just bought a car in the first place. What are you, dumb or something?
Man, it's like every sort of situation out there where it's like, why are you driving reckless on the road? Well, it's because my arm is cut open. I'm bleeding. Well, just don't drive reckless on the road then. Don't be stupid. Something like that. Or, better yet, man, those stupid ones that the doctors do where they're like, okay, what's wrong? Well, when I lift my arm like this, it hurts insanely bad. Well, don't lift it like that. Like that kind of stuff. It's like,
yeah.
It's like
or better yet, if there's like, for example, if you're on Santa's list or something like that, and someone's like, why are you on Santa's list? It's causing so much political headache for you. Well, you shouldn't have gotten the list in the first place. I guess that would have solved it. All that's kind of facts, actually. That's not even sarcastic. That's the kind of facts.
Man, that's kind of like facts. But still, Matthew, I have to ask you, what is this odd word, this list that you talk about? I've never heard this word in English before. I think you're a part of those limp idiots talking stupidity or something like that. Is that the
Yeah,
word?
I'm kind of stupid like that.
Man, I like, honestly, man, call me a little stupid as well, because I swore, man, that I heard of this word list before in my life. I think it's some sort of a Greek word or something like that. Actually, I think it's another kind of word. I heard that it's actually got an origin on some island down in the Bahamas somewhere. I think it's a native Caribbean word of some sort. Not entirely sure though. I'll have to go around and check. Maybe Spanish, perhaps. But still. With that, folks, it is time for us to move on into the Middle East. Actually, we have one last question to cover before we move on. Heavens be, I forgot. But with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so this one goes to Hal Rose, who puts in a $33 donation. And thank you very much, Hal, for that $33 support, and we appreciate that very much. He said, Enforcer Matt, congrats on 475,000 subs. And is there any award for 500K and Love Ukraine? And thank you very much, Hal, for that. We're 25,000 away from 500K, which is honestly hard to believe. But sadly, there is no new YouTube award for hitting 500,000. There is an award for hitting 1 million, but that's obviously a long way off. Maybe, hopefully sooner than we think. But there was an award for 100,000 and there's an award for 1 million, but no award for 500,000, sadly. So I thought that there was, but I was told that there's not. So sadly, no. But we'll come up with something special, though, for it, because that's going to be a big milestone. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say the same thing. Sadly, there's no big YouTube congrats for 500K. They tell you to get lost, come back at 1 million, sort of a deal. So we have to wait until we hit 1 million. But still, I've got to thank you for the support and thank you for the congrats on 475,000 subscribers, because that is one milestone in its own right to hit 475,000 subscribers. And we're actually probably going to be hitting 476,000 subscribers here within the next few days, most likely. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. So an incredibly massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly really well. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the Middle Eastern news. We were able to see earlier today that the Syrian tribal armies were continuing to attack As-Suwaida.
يا رب لك الحمد.
Moving on from that clip and into our next one, we also get to see even more clashes that were happening between the Syrian tribal armies and the Druze earlier today. This guy right here, I don't know who he is, but the aura is incredible. This guy backs up, he gives them the reassuring arm. "Excuse me, let me at them," he says, very calm. And then he just walks away. He doesn't even fire.
He did nothing, man. That was the biggest buildup. Like, the dude walked in like he was like freaking Terminator or something, stood there, analyzed the scene like he was invincible, walked up and said, "I'll take this, young man." Young man steps back, he stands up, and then he just walks off like, "All right, I've done my work here. Thank you very much." It's like, okay, then.
Right, dude. He sat there and said, "Excuse me, young man. I'll take care of this." Walked up. "That's a firefight." And then he turned around and walked off. It's like, "Thank you, Captain Obvious. It is a firefight."
He turned around. Man, he turned around and said, "Yep, y'all are screwed. I'm going to head on out."
Bro, he said, "Oh, they're encircling the street." And then he just calmly walked off after he realized that. He's like, "Oh, I'm not going to be here for this." Oh, and look at these guys literally just hanging out on the wall. If y'all don't know, this is the worst spot for the cameraman and these three guys to be, because if you shoot down a wall at a pretty high angle where you're like almost directly perpendicular to the wall, if you shoot at it, there's a high chance the bullet will actually ricochet off the wall, but it almost will travel down the full length of it as well. So if you're only about several inches off of a wall or right on a wall, there's a decent chance that some sort of a ricochet off the wall will just fly right down the wall dozens of yards and end up hitting you like it was a direct impact. Not really a smart thing for these people to be on the wall and just kind of chilling here. You know, it's almost like they're just kind of hanging out with the bros here on the wall in the middle of a firefight. I'll be honest with y'all, none of the firefights in Syria ever make any sense. It is like the most like fever dream trip sort of clips that we ever get from anyone. Like every side, the Druze, the Syrian interim government, the HTS, everyone in Syria, it's like the entire thing is a fever dream. Like, I don't ever know what to make sense of it.
And also tell me, what kind of strategy is it to line the streets like they're doing out there? Like, they've created like a barrier or a barricade with people in the streets. There's no cover whatsoever. There's in the wide open. I'm like, what is the strategy? It seems like they would at least go and try to find like some corners or some cover or something instead of just standing in the streets. And also, it's like, what enemy are they shooting at that's literally standing in the middle of the road on the opposite end? Surely they're not. So are they even shooting at anybody?
I don't know. I think, Matty, this is what they call in the old days a firing line. And this guy right here, Matty, he's their officer. If he wasn't Syrian, his accent would be, "I don't try to help, chaps. We're about to kill these dreadful barbarians in the city. Open fire, gentlemen, open fire." Like, I think that's gonna be what he's saying, because they're almost fighting in a line formation in the streets. Like, it's a return to the 1700s here.
Yeah, it's really dumb. I don't understand it at all. And it seems like if this was a real gunfight, that guy would not be standing upright like that, because the other guys are crouched. The guy in the back standing, upright completely. It seems like it's just this seems like it's made for the cameras almost.
Well, if this was a real firefight, nobody would have been out in the street, because the street is death row. Like, every street in any sort of an urban setting is death row. You don't get in the streets. You get in the alleys. You get in the buildings. You wander around the sewers. You're never out in the open in the streets. That's a death sentence, especially a street that's unobstructed like this with no cover. It's a death sentence. Oh, this guy's been having trouble with his mag the whole time. He's actually asking his friends to help him fix a jam or something like that in the middle of a firefight. Excuse me, great heavens, sir. In the middle of my crimes against humanity, shooting Druze, my gun is jammed. Can someone come over and help me to fix this situation? Dilly dilly. It's like, no, no one is, because you're an idiot. And now this guy is, of course, going through the mantras. He's got to repeat the old phrase about 90 times. You know, it's classic. Oh, bro just whipped out the gat. Like, he's going to film shooting the gat into the trees. What's he shooting at? Hell if I know. I can't even see it. But he's just shooting at something.
Dumb. I tell you what, just dumb. He shot into a tree. He said, "Praise the Lord." Day was done. Stop the recording.
Man, honestly, man, this guy is out here saying Allahu Akbar more than Kenneth Copeland says, praise Jesus. It's a lot. Like, it's like 9 gazillion times. Millions of times. But beyond that, we were able to hear that hours later, an uneasy ceasefire has been reached. And according to what we've been able to hear from the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barak, who lives in Obama, Japan. I'm just kidding, by the way. But Israel and Syria have agreed to a ceasefire supported by Turkey, Jordan, and other neighboring countries. The issue with this, however, is that this does not address the actual fighting that's going on between the Druze and the Syrian tribal armies, which do not fall under the jurisdiction of the Syrian interim government, and the Druze do not fall under the jurisdiction of the Israelis. So at the moment, both of those sides are still taking the time to build up their forces. Syrian tribal armies are actually creating traffic jams due to their size throughout Damascus, and they're continuing to flood south through the city towards the As-Suwaida government, which you can see here. As we can see, these are people with promising futures on their way to As-Suwaida to try and get into college. Excuse me, sir, do you have any trigger discipline? Trigger discipline? Never heard of them. And they just fire up into the air in the middle of a highway. You would just think, you know, like, that you just wouldn't do that, but they do. Did that guy just flag everybody on the truck? Look at him. Oh, look, this guy's also flying the flag of Syria. So he lifts up the AK, aims it right at them. Right at them, with a finger on the trigger and everything. He could have killed everyone on the truck.
Dummy.
Oh, my God. Man, honestly, man, every time we go to Syria, it's always something. It's always something.
I think that actually scared the people on the truck, actually. I think there might be some survival instinct there. I saw a couple of guys actually jump when he did that.
I did, but I don't think that's ever going to... I think they're probably about to do it back to him here in a second and not even think twice about it. Y'all would think that there's a firefight here, like with the amount of gunfire. Believe it or not, everyone's just firing into the sky. There's no firefight here. They're just on the highway to get to the fighting. They're like 50 miles away in this video from the actual fighting, and it already sounds like a war zone. Nice beamer.
Yeah, that's pretty serious. You know, every time I see a video coming out of Syria and it's just pure chaos like this and just pandemonium, it's almost like they don't want to give themselves even a split second, even think about what they're doing, because they know that if they stop to really think, they might realize how stupid it is what they're doing. Like the honking, the shooting, the yelling, the screaming. Like, how the hell can you even have a thought in an environment like this? You can't even think.
I think that's generally the point. I think you're on to something there. And we got to see them once again on their way to As-Suwaida. Here they are again. It appears that the police have also joined them. Oh wow, the genocidal maniacs are getting a police escort down to As-Suwaida. Who would have thunk? Like, this is crazy, honestly.
It's almost like Jelani and them are letting it happen.
Yeah, it's almost like they're supporting this whole deal.
Police in Syria, that's like the biggest joke I've ever seen.
Man, honestly, dude, you ought to be more scared of the police than anyone else in Syria. But anyways, to get you all a little bit of a summary of all the diplomatic developments that happened down here. So a ceasefire was brokered between Syria and Israel to technically, and I quote, let the Syrian government go in and stop the bloodshed. But it's almost like they're all forgetting that the Syrian government was the one who did the massacre in the As-Suwaida hospital not too long ago that killed hundreds of innocent civilians. just 3 days ago. And so those people are now charged with the safety of the people they just got done massacring 3 days ago in the thousands. So generally we're expecting that the bloodshed and the violence will continue and that the ceasefire is stupid. And it's not going to last long. I would like to give a big shout out to the Secretary of State, as well as the U.S. Ambassador to Syria, Tom Barak, for having no sense at this point, because I've never seen anyone go and watch an army that just went and killed hundreds of people in a hospital in Sawaida, and then went, you know who needs to protect these people from the massacres, or is the army that just massacred them 3 days ago. That is an absolutely stupid idea. That's like saying, hey, you know what? You know who ought to be the protectors of the Jewish populations left in Europe after World War II? Let's just go pick the SS. They ought to be good at it. That's the same kind of logic. That makes no sense. Like some people in the Department of State have got to open up their brains here and just go, this is a stupid idea. We're going to see that another massacre happens probably by the next 3 days, I would assume, because the army that's going down there to technically protect them are the people that were just killing them 3 days ago. So it's like, what are they going to do? Hell, they'll probably join in with the tribal armies and kill more Druze. It's like, this is just getting outrageous at this point. It's ridiculous, really. But anyways, moving on from that, the Israelis did declare more evacuation zones inside the Gaza Strip. We can actually see that they have declared evacuation codes for zip codes 960, 979, 962, 983, and 975. And they're continuing to advance southbound through the Gaza Strip towards the area of, I believe it's Han Yunis, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, no, actually, it's Nusayrat Camp and Deir al-Bala. They're moving towards Khan Yunis eventually. But anyways, with that, it does appear that the Israelis are continuing their offensives inside the Gaza Strip, and we also were able to see that Houthi missiles were intercepted over southern Israel today. These were fired from Yemeni Houthi-controlled territory.
I think they got it backwards. They said 1 missile a day keeps the U.S. away, but actually it doesn't really work like that. I think they got wrong advice from a bad doctor.
Yeah, I think they got terrible advice, the Houthis did. I think generally our premise should be 1 Marine MEU a day keeps the Houthis away. I think that should be our general principle, and we should just start to deal with the Houthis, because they're not going to cease to exist as an existent threat in the region for the foreseeable immediate future, or really the permanent future until we actually deal with them. Outside of that, and in East Asia, we were able to hear that the Chinese Foreign Ministry has once again reiterated that Taiwan is a part of China, period, and it appears that this man hit a full Lenin while he was saying it. Outside of that... Yeah, bro, let me go pull up a Lenin statue. Lenin statue. Let's see. Here we are. Blood hit a full Lenin.
Damn, man, look at that. He is Lenin. He's not Stalin. He's Lenin.
Bruh. Full-on Lenin. Dude, why in the world does he have his hand on that statue? Like, what are those? Like, he literally looks like he's about to do that. Like, boy, look at them stanky-ass shoes. It's like, why in the world did they do his hand like that in that one?
I don't know. He kind of looks like the Walt Disney statue a little bit at the beginning of like Walt Disney World, the way he's like, look at this land I've created here. Except he's missing Mickey.
Yeah, he is missing Mickey, but you know he's got plenty of? Seats. Like plenty of seats. The Soviets are great at clearing out seats in most places, because of the gulags and all. But also, I'm not gonna lie, dude, the statues of Lenin are like a mixed bag. Like, this one looks like he's about to open for a concert.
Looks like he's like Michael Jackson about to throw down a hee-hee.
Shimone. I am not on the list, guys. But anyways, moving on from that and on from the full Lenin that the foreign minister hit today in communist land, we are going to be moving on down to the Timor Sea, where we were able to hear of a U.S. naval exercise. It's the USS George Washington and His Majesty's ship, the Prince of Wales. Both were involved in a naval exercise today, along with their carrier strike groups in the Timor Sea near Australia. The U.S. and Allied forces are conducting Talisman Sabre 25 and Reforpack 25 simultaneously, surging a massive number of assets into the Pacific. Here is His Majesty's ship, Prince of Wales, right down there. Beautiful aircraft carrier, and the USS George Washington, which is also currently deployed into the East Asian area at the moment. You can also see a flight of US FA-18 Super Hornets and Royal Air Force F-35s, as well as an E-2 Greyhound in this little picture right here, along with the carrier strike group of the USS George Washington. And if you'll observe here for just a brief moment, you can actually see that the strike group is somewhat voluminous. We can actually see that there is at least one Ticonderoga class cruiser as a part of the CSG for the George Washington, along with an Arleigh Burke, and also that is most likely a British destroyer. Actually, that's a Type 23 over there for sure. These two might be British, and this might also be another Arleigh Burke of the U.S. Navy. So it actually appears that the George Washington's carrier strike group is a little light, unless if they had some other ships that were outside of frame still pulling security as a part of the defensive perimeter for the George Washington. But with that, I hope that was an interesting look. Also, here's another picture as well. Oh, look, Matthew, a commercial tanker off in the distance in the picture.
I bet it feels very secure having all this firepower nearby.
Oh, I bet. Like, I absolutely bet. These three ships here are clearly British. That actually looks to be an American vessel. Unfortunately, I don't know the class. And then there's a Ticonderoga and Arleigh Burke, and then an auxiliary further behind. But outside of that, the U.S. is exercising our strength and muscles in the Timor Sea, along with the British, which is great to see. Moving on from that and on into the Ukraine war, we still have a lot to cover inside of Ukraine at the moment. Moving on into Rylisk in the Kursk Oblast, we were able to see that the Ukrainians released the technical college in Rylisk of its duties.
18.07, Рыльск. Прилет самолетного типа. Есть пострадавшие.
Oh, yes. I see you know your judo well. And with that, we are going to be moving on into our next clip in the Kursk Oblast. But before we do, we actually have a poll. Matthew, what are people thinking about it? And what are you thinking about it?
So let's jump back to the Middle East. We forgot to address a poll before we moved on to this next segment here. And this poll says about the Middle East, despite the ceasefire claims by the Western forces, Syrian forces are still attacking the Israeli forces in Syria. And what are your thoughts? 69%, nice, said the ceasefire is a new joke, while 15% said it's a 50-50 chance of it working, and 9% said the ceasefire will work out soon. And I don't think the ceasefire is going to work out. This seems to be a common tactic by the United States these days, is to try to rush a ceasefire in every single conflict they can possibly find, and it never works, and they can just claim a quick victory. It's a lame diplomacy, and honestly, it's pointless. It's not like a real attempt at peace. They know it's not going to work. It's just a way to say, hey, look, we got a peace real quick. What do you think, folks? And everybody's like, boo. They're like, okay, next one. But anyways, Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that ceasefire is an absolute joke. I cannot state enough that, in my opinion, the work of the Department of State went from being questionable to downright stupid. I don't mean to be extremely critical, because I do not know if any members of the Department of State are watching at this point, but the concepts that are being put forward here are absolutely ridiculous. And I've got to say as well that the government has got to move away. It's getting very tiring. I'm just going to have to be honest with y'all and say it. The government has got to move away from the president is the greatest damn negotiator of all time, because the truth is that he isn't, and all of these negotiated ceasefires are absolutely ridiculous, stupid, and all of them are sitting on a house of cards. They're ridiculous. Like the one with India and Pakistan. Let's create a ceasefire in between two countries and not solve the underlying issue of how Pakistan's going to get their water. That's still not resolved, and that war is still sitting there on the back burner right now, ready to pop off at any moment, because the Pakistanis still don't have water. So we got a ceasefire and we didn't even resolve the underlying issue that would actually ensure that no other future conflicts would pop up in that area. Then we sit there. Let's try and negotiate something with the Iranians that clearly isn't going to last, because they're already working towards nuclear weapons again. I mean, it's clear that these are not master negotiating moves. This is literally forcing a ceasefire to happen, and you're not even fixing the issues that would actually lead to a successful ceasefire. It's just doing ceasefires to do them. And I don't know if the Secretary of State is cooking up these ideas at this point and then sending out these ambassadors to do the Secretary of State's bidding, or whether this is the president's ambitions and the Secretary of State's just having to follow through with them to keep his position. I'm not entirely sure. But this is just getting absolutely downright ridiculous. We are sending pretty much the post-World War SS to go protect the Jews in post-war Europe after World War II. That's just what we did today. It's a ridiculous it's a ridiculous concept. It just doesn't make any sense. It's standing on a shallow principle and on very unshaky and very shaken ground. There's no way that this army is going to go down there and protect the Druze people. Just 3 days ago, they were killing them. So why in the world would they be down there protecting them 3 days later? It doesn't make any sense at all. And I gotta call a spade, folks, when I see it. This whole idea of just calling up, just making ceasefires to make ceasefires to go look how great of a ceasefire negotiator we are. This is getting stupid. We shouldn't have negotiated a ceasefire with the Syrians. We should have said the Israelis are perfectly fine doing what they're doing, because if they're not doing that, the Druze are going to end up getting wiped out. Now we've pretty much given the Syrians a blank check to attack the Israelis. The Israelis are adhering to their side of the ceasefire so far, and the tribal armies are still flooding into Sawaida right now. Nothing's been solved. This has done nothing but absolutely create a mess, an absolute unmitigated mess out of the situation. And then the ceasefire is going to collapse, and then you know what's going to happen. Because we have to be master negotiators, at least in the administration currently, it's going to be blamed on the Israelis, believe it or not. The massacres that the Sunni Arabs are conducting against the Druze, entirely Israel's fault. Israel's trying to go in and protect them because they're not going to stop massacring the Druze, but it's going to be Syria's fault because for some reason, somehow, some way, there would have been a long-lasting peace between the Sunni Arabs, which hate the Druze, and the Druze, which generally don't like the Sunni Arabs. And that makes no sense. I'm saying this again. The Department of State should abandon this philosophy, and we should move back forward with an idea of maybe somehow balkanizing the Syria, or creating some sort of semi-autonomous regions that will not be able to get curb stomped by the majority Sunni Arab population in Syria. Because if they're all put under one roof inside of Syria, they are destined to go out and kill each other. It's a damn near certainty at this point. There's no way you can't see it. I mean, that's exactly what's going on right now. And so I hope that does address that the best I can. But I will be honest with you folks. Whenever I see absolutely brain-dead actions coming out of the Department of State, I just have to ask why. Because it just does not make any sense what we're doing right now, and this is bound to fail. And so with that, we are moving on out of the Syrian interim government, and we're moving right back into Ukraine, and back into the news that we have up here. In the Suja region, we have been able to see that the Russians have been slammed by hammers once again. The Ukrainians have been using these prolifically in airstrikes, because the French give them an ample supply of the GBU 250, well actually not GBU, the AASM 250 hammers. And with that, we are going to be moving on from that clip inside the Kursk Oblast and further on down into our location unknowns, where we were actually able to see a great clip. This is the Russian army of common sense and good judgment. And you can see here that they're about to make an action of great sense and good judgment. And Enforcer Matt, are you back?
Yes.
I have to show you this clip, Matthew. This is a clip of amazing intelligence and combat bravery on display. Here is a Russian soldier, and that lump on the road is a TM-62 anti-tank mine. Now, the issue is that they have to clear the road, but the Russians, being the Russians, are going to do this the sensible way. Matthew, what options is this Russian going to take? Is he going to, A, defuse the landmine and move it off the road? B, is he going to take the landmine with the fuse still intact, pick it up, and throw it off the side of the road? Is he, C, going to just try and drive over it? Or is he, D, going to shoot the landmine and hope that diffuses it? Which of those options is he going to take?
I think he's going to take option E. He's going to steal it.
Well, you were incorrect. He's going to go with option D, shoot the landmine, and attempt to defuse it that way. Let's see how this works. It seems to have failed.
No, it worked. It worked perfect.
Working perfect. He just got a face full of shrapnel. He's probably going to the great beyond right now, and the cameraman is also most likely going to join the Jackass crew after this one. So it does appear that this is not the successful way to defuse and remove landmines from active roadways. This is not a smart idea. But moving on from that clip and on into our next one, we also got to see Russian logistics at its finest. Even the donkeys have run out now, and so now they have resulted to raw manpower.
Oh man, they're using him as the donkey now. He's the ass.
Bro, he was always the ass.
But now he's carrying the bin now, so now he became the jackass.
Oh, dude. You know what's even more interesting, Matthew, is that Russia is getting so bad off, they can't even afford to give him like a wagon or something to tow, but he's literally just dragging across the floor.
And also, like, I don't know what that is, like, normally, like a suitcase or something. Those little wheels are not suitable for that suitcase right there. Like, even if that's what that's supposed to be used for.
Yeah, this is. Oh, you got it
Someone
stuck in
says that at
something.
coffin. I mean, I don't know what the hell. I've never seen a
Что Владос
suitcase like
сказал?
this. It's kind of wild.
Well,
Those guys pissed.
on the front though, they don't give out coffins for remains. They just throw them in plastic trash bags or body bags. But generally nowadays they've run out of body bags. They just generally throw remains in trash bags, and then they cart it off that way. Or they just throw them in linens. Like they'll just get, well, not like Vladimir Lenin. They don't throw them in linen, but they go get like linens, cloths or whatever, and they just wrap them up and cart them off like a rug. But still. It seems that the jackasses refuse to move. But moving on from that and on into the Russian casualty report, we've also been able to see the Russian losses for the day, and they have been quite significant. And we have been able to see that there once again, unfortunately, are no Bobcat skid steers. But Miss DC Keeper of the Records did say that the troop loss for the 7-day average has risen to 1,173. APCs are big increases once again over the average, and drones are actually lower. Other categories are close to average. And we were able to see that over the past 24 hours, 1,180 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed, along with 9 APCs, 111 supply trucks, 3 main battle tanks, 47 artillery systems, 135 drones, and 1 MLRS. In general, a fairly good day by all measures. Moving on from that and up into the Vovchansk area, we also get to see the Ukrainians hitting the Russians in this area, while also playing Funky Town. We can see the drone flying on in and hitting this little crappy Buhanka pickup. We see them also hitting another Buhanka pickup, and then flinging an RPG into the tree line. And just slamming them, heavens be. They just get them good.
Look at that trash heap right there. You know the Russians definitely built that.
Man, these trench works are rough. Like they actually are. Look at that, dude. It's like the construction of this is no better than the construction in Haiti. I mean, it's pretty bad off. But moving on from that and on into our next clip further on down the way, and in the area of Touretsk, we were able to see that they were hitting Russian forces down here. And we see them dropping bomblets onto the Russian positions and clearing them on out. Quite a decent amount of explosions indeed. Mostrolab said trenches of poor quality by World War I standards. They really are. And World War I trenches were sometimes, half the time, dug by hand. And moving on from that clip and on down to the Pokrovsk, we also get to see them hitting more Russian forces in this area, and quite a lot of them. These were actually hit by Magyar's birds. At first, we were able to see them hitting an artillery piece hidden amongst the trees. And it appears to be a D-30, and that D-30 is now gone. We can also see them coming in and hitting the D-30 a second time. This is even better the second time. And any second now. And now we can see them coming in and hitting another artillery piece. This one already appears to have been hit before, along with its transport, but they're going to hit it a second time because hit them with a double tap. And there we go. They hit it, and it's on fire. It's cooking on up.
Are they still using these as fiber optic drones still, or have they gone back to using different ones like the wireless?
They're still using fiber optics a good bit, especially in the Worm Busters units.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw it say opto at the bottom, so I was wondering.
We see them here hitting another artillery piece. It appears the Ukrainian counter battery was very effective over the course of the day. Great heavens. We see them slamming them right there as well. And I just saw someone in the chat say, distraction from the lisp. What lisp? I have never heard of such a thing. Heavens.
Man. Oh, man. Distractions are so needed at this point. They'll bring Michael Jackson back from the dead at this point if they need to.
Moving on from that, in the southern front, the Ronin was also hitting and destroying some Russian forces as well. Oh heavens, Shock News Diesel said, you guys keep talking about the southeast of Moscow, or the southeast of Russia. And you're right, it is the southwest. Sorry, if I said southeast earlier, it was southwest. Sometimes I'm directionally challenged.
Hey, if Kaplan said, God forbid. Well, I mean, he wasn't terrible. I mean, there were some allegations, but he wasn't terrible.
Here's to keeping secrets secret, and here's to more secrets.
You enigma, you.
Oh, you buddy.
I don't talk like that. Shows a clip of him saying the word. Shows a clip of him doodling.
And also another drawing that was actually auctioned off, proving that he does in fact draw.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. And also that one article from that one magazine where he actually gave a direct quote to him, where he said, me and this other fella, we like them more so on the lower side, if you know what I mean. You know, if you ever saw the direct quote, Matthew. And I'm like, that's not a comment that ages too well, you know, especially given the current environment right now. You know, it's not really a good one.
I want to see the note personally. It allegedly had a doodle on there, like, something that maybe a high schooler would doodle, like, what's on the minds of, like, people like that, sort of like a little bit of an explicit doodle. I heard. I'd like to have to see what the hell that looked like, because honestly, people were describing this, but I'm like, I need to see the evidence, honestly.
Well, Matthew, that's only shown to fans, you know. But that's the end of the clip right there. Moving on from that and on down to Tokmak, we also get to see the Russians getting hit down here. We don't know what was exactly hit inside of Tokmak, but it does appear that multiple Ukrainian drones did hit the city and did hit Russian targets currently occupying the city. Further on down inside of Kherson, we also were able to see more Russians getting hit inside of the Dnipro estuary. Take a look. And we see them hitting a boat.
Oh, Ms. Deesa said, too much for young innocent eyes. I really when I say I need to see the evidence, like, really honestly, I don't want to see the evidence, but I want to see if the story actually checks out. That's what I mean by that. But no, I really don't want to see explicit doodles. I have no interest at all.
Me either, to be entirely honest. But we did get to see that Odessa was under attack tonight, and some Russian drones did end up hitting the city. Also, outside of that is actually the conclusion of all of our news for the day, and that actually moves us on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. Unfortunately, Zelensky was out of the office today. He was out to lunch. Take this, you rat, and that, and that's all. I'm going to save the rest for my lunch. you know what I'm talking about, Mandy. But beyond that, it is time for us to move on into the second part of the stream, where we get to talk to all of y'all. Unfortunately, we do not have a speech from President Zelensky of Ukraine, but nevertheless, we will be able to get into chit-chatting and talking with each and every one of y'all, hopefully. And boy, howdy, folks, do we love this segment. It is a fun, enjoyable segment. And I've got to thank you all so much so far for watching. 130,000 people have watched our stream so far tonight, with a peak viewership of 15.5 thousand people. So an incredibly massive thanks to all of you once again. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the question segment. So Matthew, please take it away.
All right, so it's now time for the final question segment of the night. So it's now time to jump right into it. And you might notice we have no polls left. We have no polls remaining. The polls are now closed. The polls are over. But we do love the polls very much. And of course, Poland's a very safe place to be in the current day, in the modern day world, even though they're literally butted right to Belarus and also Ukraine, which is at war. But yet Poland's very safe. What do you know? But anyways, jumping into our first Super Chat question here of our last segment, this one goes to Andrew Barbro, who puts in a $30 donation. And thank you very much, Andrew, for being a longtime channel legend and supporting the channel yet again. He said, never forget Always remember and keep an eye on everything around you and never admit you witnessed it, then go hide. Haha. Take one from the chat. That honestly sounds like a bad strategy right there. That sounds like, and we're seeing that strategy is not working too well in the modern day. Apparently, that is not a good plan. I think, honestly, the best plan would be just don't do it in the first place. That'd probably be the better plan. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree. I mean, it's not working too well, is it? Folks, here's what I have to say. Here's what I have to say, folks. You don't want to be involved in any kind of questionable scandals? Don't get involved in questionable things. It's easy, folks. It's like, it's kind of like, not maybe robbing a bank. If you're scared of going to prison, maybe don't rob banks. Maybe not. Maybe a smart idea. You're scared of getting involved in some sort of a reputation-destroying scandal? Maybe don't visit private islands, I heard, Matty, there was this one guy, actually, who was in prison recently that passed away. Odd circumstance. But he said something like, I've got this special island. It's called Pleasure Island. Pleasure Island? Pleasure Island? Where? There's no law. There's no law. Honestly, man, it's like damn, man.
I think this might have been going on for such a long time that the writers back in those cartoons was writing about it back in late 1900s.
Man, I'm telling you, man, that Pleasure Island, it gets you. But don't get involved in that stuff, It's like, if you don't want to be known, as a possible, Secretary of Defense that might be a raging alcoholic, maybe don't go out on alcoholic benders, If you don't want to be known as someone who, might be popping some uppers, maybe don't be a CEO that's really open about it. Maybe, just pop the uppers in private. Just have a little bit of sense, I just don't know how a lot of people don't have a lot of it, like, for example, for some other people, if you don't want to, be known as like a congressperson who does all of these crazy stock trades that end up making you tons of money, and they're always done just predictably at the right time when the right stock's going up, and you sell all of your stocks right when that stock's about to go down, maybe don't do that, maybe not. Maybe not. Is that being a little bit too upfront for people? A little bit too sensible? Not to get involved in stupid stuff so that way it doesn't come up later that you were a part of something stupid. Maybe it sounds a little bit too honest or too upfront. But that's just kind of the honest truth, folks. That's just how it works out there. So, it is what it is. So with that, I hope that does address that well, Andrew Barbaro. But I hope that was just sort of an honest assessment of doing stupid stuff, especially when people have very low tolerance for you doing stupid stuff. Maybe don't do it. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And I saw someone ask the big question in the chat. I saw someone ask it. I would tell you, but YouTube wouldn't want me to tell you the real reason as to why they do those sorts of things. But there's an answer out there, and it's to say it the best way, it's really based on power and being able to do things that other people can't do. That's really the whole thing about it. Nothing more than that. And it leads a lot of people who end up being incredibly wealthy or having some sort of power that they have over other people. It leads them to become depraved. There's actually an old saying that absolute power corrupts. And generally, a lot of people who become, well, not a lot of people, but a good amount of people who become incredibly wealthy or incredibly powerful, they start to get this idea that they can start to push the boundaries. How far does this power really go? How far can I actually take it to keep feeling this great sense of power? And it will push them to do things that most of us here would consider to be morally reprehensible. And that's generally the reason why. When you boil down the root cause of why people do these sorts of things, that's really the answer. So with that, I hope that does...
Or another idea is if you put anybody into certain circumstances where it's deemed to be acceptable to do something that's typically considered terrible and heinous and atrocious, typically if you put even somewhat neutral people in a bad environment, some people end up doing heinous stuff because they're led to believe, oh, this is what they're doing. They're very powerful. They're very rich as well. They're in the know. They're connected. So it must be okay for me to do it too. And then they think, oh, yeah, it's fine for me to do it. But then it turns out that individual filmed you doing something so that way they could get some leverage over you. And it was a trap the entire time. So, now here's my thing though. if someone, no matter how much money someone's got, if they don't know the difference between doing something as heinous as that and also, right and wrong in that particular instance right there, then they've got some serious problems, some very serious problems, actually. So, it's just, I wish I could elaborate some more on that, but I don't know how YouTube would let us go so far with it. So I'll have to stop.
And and also some of y'all are thinking, wow, this is like a really modern thing. Oh heavens, no, this is old as time. Go pull up Lord Kitchener, of a famous repute in Britain, for raising the Kitchener's army at the beginning of World War One. Go look into what some maids and even some, how do I say it? How do I say it without YouTube, coming down? Go listen to what
Careful.
go listen to what some maids and some of the folks wandering around Kitchener's Manor said he was like in his private life, because every single one of them came out with the exact same allegation, and it was a pretty dark, disturbing, and nasty sort of an allegation to make. And because so many people came out and said it about him, literally everyone that was in his manor, everyone couldn't have been in on the conspiracy. It has to be true, and it's really crazy to think that a lot of people, when they get into positions like that, they just go, "I can do whatever the hell I want," and they do whatever the hell they want, not because they ever wanted to do that, just because they can. It's kind of like it's kind of like how when some people go to war. Maybe this is good. Yeah, this is a good way to explain it. You got John Doe, average guy. He lives in Alabama, works on a farm. We're talking 1940s here. Works on a farm. He's like 23, pretty all right guy. Most people find him to be pretty decent. He gets put in the army. He's sent to France. And then he's got a uniform and he's got a gun. And he ended up somehow becoming a sergeant at some point. So the guy's got a little bit of power under his belt. And he's also got a gun with him. And as you all know, some people say the pen is better than the sword, but some people have found out that the sword can practically do just about anything. And so this guy decides, while he's in a French town, that he sees a French woman he likes, and he's going to wield a little bit of power he's got to get what he wants. He ends up getting charged with a crime. And if he hadn't ever been found or caught, he would have never been charged with a crime. And that gives him the idea, I've got this little bit of power I can wield. How far can I take that power and do whatever the hell? He would have never done that in a normal circumstance, but considering that he's got a little bit of power, he's going to test how far he can take it. And that's what some people end up doing. If some people get money, which translates really to power, or any kind of raw power through some sort of a position of authority, some people are going to take that and they are going to push that envelope as far as they can take it until they cross the line somewhere somehow, or they may never cross the line because no one may ever find out. And it has nothing to do with them ever wanting to be like, man, I've just really wanted to do this thing that's illegal because I really have this itch for it. It's really more so about, like, this thing is illegal, and just for the fact it's illegal, I want to see if I have enough power and authority to push that boundary and just keep getting away with it, because that's how they get their kicks. That's
I think this particular one that you're alluding to right here, I think it was more of a the people were friends with an individual. This individual had an ulterior motive in mind. He would bring people down to an isolated area, which would be an island, which obviously an island's very isolated. There's hardly anybody around except for the people they want to be around. You bring them down there, they meet with the guy, they talk to the guy, they're good friends with the guy, they get to have some trust, and then all of a sudden they find themselves surrounded with some people which are not appropriate. And then all of a sudden there's some advances made and things like that, and then all of a sudden you find yourself doing something that you should never do in 100 million years, and that's what happens. That's the way I think it happened. And honestly, it sounds like, what it really sounds like? It sounds like a honey trap. That's what it sounds like to me. Not excusing at all what these people did. Like, it's heinous, it's horrific. There's no excuse for it at all, like none. But it sounds like a honey trap at the same time. Not excusing it, but it seems like maybe there was some ulterior motive behind doing it, other than just merely being extremely immoral.
Also, I saw someone come in. Somebody who might be a little new to the game here on this channel. They said, your boy Joe had the imaginary list for 4 years, and everyone and then also goes on to say the list does exist, and everyone on it is, of course, of the other political party they don't like. Here's my question for you. Think with your brain for a minute. If everyone on the list was a political enemy of the current president, why wouldn't the list be released? It would do him no harm, so why not release it? Like, think about that for a minute. Think about that and get an answer back to me. Now, the reason why we didn't crack jokes about it for the past 3 years is because the last guy never even touched it. Quite clearly, just brush it under the rug and forget it, kind of a cover up. One that you really can't make a lot of a mention on. But in the current situation right now, with what we're hearing coming out of the world right now, this is the worst cover up I've ever seen. Like, as far as how it's actually going with the attempted covering up, it's going terribly. So it's become comical at this point with how badly a cover up is being attempted and how badly it's failing and how no one's even biting at it, beyond people like you who have to believe anything. Like, that's generally kind of the truth of it. But here's my thing. With how everyone's addressed it, it's quite clear that many people are on this list. And it isn't everyone from one side or everyone from another. There's a lot of people on every side on this list. And that's generally why it's not coming out. Because it would end up being damaging to everyone. And if it's damaging to everyone, it's mutually in everyone's benefit to bury it. That's generally what it is. So thinking about it in a partisan political mindset where it's only libs or it's the rhino or whatever that's on the list, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because if it was the case, why in the world would one person or the other not release it, considering that it would only do endless political damage to their opposition? That makes no sense.
It's so like I honestly don't want to talk about this, but it's on my mind 24/7. It is so demoralizing to see like something like this happening. Like, it's not the first time there's been a scandal in America by any means, but it just like it's like a wrench on the soul almost to see it being held like covered up like this. It's disgusting. Like, and especially how blatant it is. It's disgusting at that. But my thing is this. I don't think people truly understand, like, if this thing has the lid blown open and it becomes totally public and everything is known at that point, I don't think people fully understand the extent of the damage that's going to do. Yes, the people will be held accountable, but the damage that's going to do is going to be something that America's going to have a tough time, I think, dealing with at the same time. So I'm a huge proponent of people being held accountable, like 100% all the way. But I'm concerned either which way this goes. If it gets covered up, I'm concerned about justice in America. That's a huge concern. And if it gets exposed, then I'm concerned about the cohesion of the government at that point, because I'm not sure really how far this goes, and nobody's really sure how far it goes. I think some people have a good idea how far it goes, but nobody's really ready for the fallout, I don't think.
Yeah. Also, this fellow returned exactly my point. If the current, I'm not like, you're so, buddy, you're so tied up in the Kool-Aid drinking, you're not thinking with your brain. If everyone else was on the list, let's say your golden guy who's in office right now isn't on the list. So if everyone else is on the list, why wouldn't he release it? Why wouldn't he? If it's only just, those filthy liberals on the list, why wouldn't he release it? It would only do damage to his opposition. Why wouldn't he release it? Why wouldn't have they in the past administration of the other party released it to damage his reputation? The answer is because it's not one group or the other on the list. There's a lot of people from every side on the list. So it becomes everyone's inherent interest to bury it and to not talk about it. Because, you know, you sit there and pay attention a little bit to what happened recently, leading up to the election. Oh, list. It's coming out. It's coming out. Vote for us. It's coming out. The truth will be here. Vote it in. Oh yeah, we've seen all the footage. We've seen all of the files. We're releasing files phase 1. They released files phase 1 and everything was censored out. If y'all remember, every single line almost except for very few were blacked out, or there was very little information given. And then people started going, wait a minute, what about this? Like, we were told that this would happen. What about this? And then they started going and started repeating the same things that everyone else was saying under the last administration that generally was considered a cover-up. And so then they started to say, well, what the hell's going on now? We were told that we were going to get a release to the list. And now the retort is to attack everyone who was asking for the list. And a lot of people who voted in someone off of the assumption that the truth would finally be had and everyone in the public would actually get to know how far this went. And now instead of that, the answer is it's all going to be swept under the rug, just like it was in the last administration, and no one's ever going to get an answer. And that's what's starting to cause a lot of public outrage, because everyone was already unhappy with it in the prior administration. Now it's continuing in the current one, but it's very blatant that it is. Unlike the prior administration, which swept it under the rug and literally would never touch it or even speak of it, and treated it like it was
I
a
think
joke.
that shows you. I think that shows you how far it goes too. If it's something that both political parties can agree on, which I don't think they agree on basically anything anymore. Like there's zero issues that they can agree on anything, but yet they agree on one thing, staying quiet. Like that must be pretty damn deep.
Yeah, I mean it's a sort of a crazy thing, and I see some people like, oh, it's political. This is not at all political, because this is the most unbiased sort of political analysis I can give you. Nobody's released it. So if nobody's releasing it, everyone's in the same camp from an analytical perspective. So if everyone's not releasing it, then everyone has an invested interest to keep it under wraps, to put it that way. And if everyone has an invested interest to keep it under the wraps, why? There can only be one answer, is because if it's not kept under wraps, it's going to equally damage everyone on every side. So that's kind of that's the only deductive reasoning that could be had. If you work with a logical brain, that's the only sort of logical answer that could come out of this point, is that if both sides are not willing to, it's like saying this. It's like saying, if we publicly state what the CIA has really been doing for the past 20 years, it's going to be hell on earth. Like, just as an example, it's going to be hell on earth. Everyone's going to be pissed. Everyone's going to be wanting accountability. But the problem is that Republicans and Democrats have been alternating the presidency, and therefore largely the control over the CIA for the past 20 years. So if they release everything that's going to be going on, or what has been going on in the CIA, everybody, Republican and Democrats, going to look horrendous because of the release of the info. So instead, both sides agree, let's just keep that on the very down low, or not talk about it at all, because if it comes out, hell's going to rain down on everyone. And that's the only.
Did you know that there's already? Did you know that there's already a version of the list already out there that's public? Actually, I'm not sure if many people know that, but there is a list that's already public.
No, I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, it's called I think the Little Black Book, or something like that. It's already public. It was up for auction actually, by a small auction house up in New England, a short while back, and it has people's contact information, the phone numbers, emails, their address, of very powerful people in the world in this book. The whole book has not been made public. There's been bits and pieces of it that have been like leaked out here and there, but I think the book is still in New England, actually. I'm not sure who's in possession of it, but I don't think it's sold at auction. So I'm not really sure who's gotten their hands on it at this point. I'm not sure why the government hasn't, seized it. So considering that it's probably a piece of evidence, but there's already a list out there. But that's not the smoking gun like people are looking for. That's just another book.
Yeah, but still interesting nonetheless. The only reason I'm bringing it up, folks, is because this is the biggest political scandal that's happened in this century so far. And it's one that's not just reaching on the one side. It's one that's all reaching at this point, with how this has been handled for over the past 7 years or so, since it started to pop up and become an issue. And so that's really generally the reason why I'm bringing it up, because this is something, folks, whether we ever, we'll never address politics in a partisan way, but this is something, in my opinion, folks, that is already at this point right now having become bigger than Watergate. Like, it's getting beyond that right now, and it's becoming a thing of its own. It will certainly be in the books for a good long while, because there was a lot of murmurings about it for a good many years, and a lot of them were just absolutely crazy. But now there's a clear sort of a push to keep this thing on the down low, no matter who's in charge, which is starting to show that this is probably one of the biggest or most significant scandals that has been seen in this century so far. There might be one that trumps it before the end of the century, but for now, it is certainly, in my opinion, one of the biggest. But anyways,
And also the people saying, why doesn't somebody speak out that has knowledge about the issue? You can sort of use common sense on that one a little bit. When you're speaking out against people that hold a lot of power, that have a large network of powerful people, there's always some risk involved with it. I'm not saying I'm not saying how far they're going to go with it, but there's always some risk about speaking out. Like, for example, one of the victims of the individual on the island found themselves hit by a bus, and then 2 weeks later they were no longer. So I'm not saying that appeared to be probably what it was. Not saying anything was funny about that or like bad off. Like, it's kind of hard to tell like really what happened with that. But you got to be careful, because if it's really deep and it's really as bad as it looks, most people aren't going to come out and say something about it. They don't want to take that risk.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Also another thing, folks, because I see some people trying to twist this, and it always happens whenever we talk about anything that has to do with anyone in the political world in America, because the current president's the one at the helm dealing with this. Everyone's like, why are you talking about the current president in such a way? What about the demons of the last administration? Or some stupid stuff like that. Okay, well, let me just say this really quickly, just to make sure that I hit all of our non-political check marks. Why in the world did the last president on the way out give himself and his family pretty much an entire pardon for anything and everything that happened over the past 7 years or 10 years? It's suggesting that there was a general belief that something else could be coming around the pipe that might end up coming back on him. So, pretty much absolved of all sins from here and forevermore, and let me get the hell out of here. That was what the response was from there. So it generally is showing this is a pretty overarching sort of a thing at this point. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get back to questions because I do rather enjoy our question segments. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Glock Glock, who's there, LSA, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Mr. Glock, for that support. He said Pizza Fund and LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the pizza fund, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Octavian Timor, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Octavian, for that support as well. He said, maybe you'll find this interesting. Right now, Canadian soldiers are guarding the Buckingham Palace entrance, only the third time in history. And Canada is the sole Commonwealth nation, minus the UK, granted the ceremonial honor.
And thank you for the support. That's actually pretty cool. And I believe that the Royal Air Force actually guarded Buckingham Palace for the first time in their history not too long ago. But King Charles has actually been, King Charles III, has actually been doing that throughout most of his reign, is that a lot of Commonwealth nations and armed forces that are not inside of the household guard have actually been allowed to guard Buckingham Palace. And it's a very interesting sort of a thing to see that they are not forces of the household regiments. But still, I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well, and that is actually incredibly interesting. And a big thanks to you for sharing that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Mechtild55, who puts in a 20. He said, looking at a list of NATO members, many are Soviet bloc countries who gained their independence, but not Ukraine. And how come when Ukraine has more to offer NATO than these other past Soviet bloc countries?
Generally, it's because NATO tries to have a direct land border with whoever is a member or something similar to that. And so they've been working eastwards through Europe since the collapse of the Soviet Union. So unified Germany, of course, was by default in NATO because West Germany was in NATO. And then Poland and the Baltics would join not long after. And then most of the Balkan states, which are also part of the former Soviet Union or Yugoslavia, would end up joining NATO as well. And then finally, it came around time that Ukraine and Moldova were being considered for NATO membership as well. The issue is that by that point, Russia had built up enough of their forces that they could actually launch a ground invasion. During the 90s, when all of the former Soviet bloc countries were joining, there wasn't really much Russia could do because they couldn't even really fund the government at that point, much less fight a major war that would last any longer than a couple of days. So they generally just had to sit by and let that happen. But when Putin finally saw that Ukraine was asking for NATO membership in 2021, that's when we saw the force buildups and then the beginning of war with Ukraine. Right after that, in the beginning of 2022, was because Russia actually had the ability to finally stop someone from joining NATO. They were never a big fan of any of the former Soviet republics or the Eastern Bloc joining NATO, but it's not really like they had a choice. There was literally nothing that they could have done about it until recently. So that's generally the best answer that I could give from a historical lens. And so with that, I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running, and I hope that does address that incredibly. Also, I also have to add in that Ukraine's military and civil apparatuses were so corrupt for a long period of time, because, once again, it's a former Soviet republic, and Russia really Russified Ukraine, at least in its governmental structure in the Soviet Union. So the kind of corruption that's rife in Russia was as rife in Ukraine for about the past 30 years for most of it. And so NATO would constantly go, nope, they can't join. They're way too corrupt. Like, the military's too corrupt. It's going to foster a culture of corruption in most NATO forces. We can't have them in. And so then recently, finally, around 2021, that's when it was like, okay, they might be clean enough now from the ails of corruption that we could actually bring them in. And then that's why Russia actually went to war and invaded Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that does also address that little section or little answer there well, on top of everything else I already said. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, Rosalie said in the live chat, did you guys hear that Stephen Colbert just got canceled? His show got canceled because of some financial reasons. That was the official line from the company as to why he got canceled. I saw a video of him today. He would look depressed, and understandably so. His show just got canceled after years and years of doing it. So maybe I guess maybe it was financial problems. I'm not really sure. I really didn't watch that fellow's show very much. I don't really watch many of the late night talk show people, because obviously when it's late night and it's time to talk, we're talking, so we don't watch them. But anyways, unfortunately, what say you?
I'd have to say I haven't really watched Colbert or really any of them, Kimmel or any of those talk shows. I'm honestly not really a big fan of talk shows. Like, Johnny Carson had a good one, and that was generally the only good one that I can think of. There were some okay ones beyond that, like John Letterman and stuff. But I'm just generally not a big fan of talk shows. And I generally also don't like modern talk shows, except for Conan's. Conan's was actually pretty good. But the rest of them got really political because they found out that that's a cheap and easy way to bring in higher ratings. Because the talk show, I guess you could say the talk show genre was starting to slip in the ratings in general before a lot of them started to become political. And so that's another reason why I don't really watch them, because I'm not really a big fan of the whole political indoctrination thing that they try and do on the talk shows, where literally everything is politics. It's like, this is just old. So I personally never watched them. As far as the show getting canceled, I never, the few times I ever watched it, I wasn't really a big fan of it. It was boring and kind of lame, and a lot of the jokes were really poorly written too. If y'all don't know, the talk show hosts actually don't do any of their writing hardly. Most of it's done by a crew of writers, and the writers on most talk shows are absolutely terrible. Honestly, a lot of writers in the modern day in Hollywood are absolutely abysmal. They have terrible writing skills, and so they come up with absolutely lame jokes. And funnily enough, to actually speak about this for a minute, I ran into this guy at law school when we were at law school 2 years ago at this point, which is kind of crazy to think that was about 2 years ago nearly. But actually, was it? No, it was like a year and a half ago.
A few months.
It was a year and a half ago or so. But about a year and a half ago when we were in law school, I ran into this guy. And funnily enough, y'all, he actually was an assistant writer at Fox. And I was like, okay. I was like, that's interesting. And this guy was very full of himself, and the jokes that he would make were some of the lamest jokes. Not even a nose exhale could do. That would be overdoing it in response to a lot of the jokes. I was like, these are some very cringe jokes. And the guy just thought a million miles of himself as well. And I was like, yeah, this is very tough. I was like, this is very tough. But honestly, most people in law school were like that. But this guy really kind of shone out above the rest. And I was like, so this is what the writers are made up of. And this guy actually wrote for someone on Fox that, Matthew, you know the guy I'm thinking about, right?
Yeah,
The guy who's the supposed comedian. And he makes the worst jokes ever. And I was like, that's why the jokes are so bad. They've got these people writing the jokes. I was like, oh my God, it makes sense. I was like, the jokes have always been terrible. They're awful.
If I had to go down New York's highway, I'd rather stick my foot in my mouth and drive down the street. It'll be stupid stuff like that, and that really crass tone that he uses. I just don't like it. It's not my thing.
Yeah, and then Ronaldo laughs at it, or something
Ronaldo.
Yeah, whoever his name, not Ronaldo. That other guy, the guy with
Geraldo.
Geraldo, yeah, not the other guy. The other guy's the football guy, but that guy, I don't know his name, but he would laugh at it or something. But it's like, damn, that's a terrible joke. And so that's why the jokes are terrible on a lot of these talk shows, is for that reason. And so I just don't like them, because it's like, damn, y'all couldn't get better writers to make better jokes than this. So yeah, I never really watched it. So hearing that a show was canceled, it wasn't any skin off of my back. It's not like I really watched or even enjoyed the show. But I heard that the guy's been crushed about it, which is very unfortunate. But at the same time, like on the same note, not to sound like I'm empathetic, but he could have just gone a route like Conan and actually been interesting as a person or relatable. Because Conan is interesting. Like, I think a lot of y'all can agree. Conan's actually just interesting. He doesn't get into politics. He's just raw entertainment. He does great at it, and he's got a great personality. He does great at running a show like that. But every other talk show host decided to generally try and become a hack, and they were like, I could just easily get ratings by going deep into politics, at least for a short-term stint. And he was also one of those people. And it's like, like that's not a long-term formula for survival, is getting extremely political. That's a way to generate short-term ratings boosts, but that is a way to kill your entire career long-term. So with that, I hope that does address that well, or at least that news, because it's not shocking to hear that it's being canceled. I actually heard that his ratings were slipping, and also there were some other things going on at the same time as well. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also someone said Conan was awkward. Conan was only awkward at the start. Conan's actually pretty funny. Like, Conan is pretty good. Like, he had to stretch his wings a little bit as a talk show host, because he literally came out of the writer's room right into being a talk show host. So he had no in-camera experience in anything before that. But beyond that, he was pretty good. Like, also someone said he became stupid, but that's the thing. Like, he's just a funny guy. Like, he just does the goofy stuff, kind of like we do from time to time on the show. So, I'm like, I appreciate that. He didn't become a political hack. He, pretty much made the whole thing his personality. I really appreciate him for that. And he's succeeded really well. And he stayed true to himself and did what he wanted to do. So I appreciate him greatly for that. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And there's a lot of Conan haters.
I gotta say, me personally, I'm not saying it because some people don't find, like, for example, me or the Enforcer to be like, some people don't hate us, like they don't like our personality at all. Like, it's understandable. Like, not everybody's for everybody. Me personally, I don't jive with that Conan fellow. Like, I'm not hating on him or anything, but it's just not really my thing to watch as like a show. That's just me personally, though. He's a little too eccentric or something, like a little bit too much going on.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's a trumped up sort of like a personality thing for, pretty much clownifying himself for the purpose of being the clown. That's just kind of like
children's stuff, though, like a children's like comedy. It's like, we get childish, like, obviously from time to time, but we don't like make it our entire thing. Like, at least I don't try to.
Yeah, I mean, we aren't absolute like clowns the whole time, but I still appreciate him for that, because it's like for the modern day talk show host, it was either do what he did or become a political hack. And so it's like, which one would I've rather have seen? I would have rather dealt with him just being funny and clownish, because that's a lot more palatable to me, at least in that kind of a sphere, than just becoming a political hack for the ratings. And I also just saw someone say Jimmy Fallon is the best. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Oh my God, Matthew, that is so. Oh my. Oh, tell me something, Matthew. Tell me.
What?
Oh my God, that's what he does, like, on a show every day. It's like just literally every time anyone breathes, he laughs.
That guy was actually extremely nervous and kind of awkward to get on camera and actually do that gig right there, but he took it anyway.
Yeah, but I've heard that apparently he's really curt behind the scenes. Like, he's really, really curt behind the scenes to folks. He's kind of like, from what I've heard, at least allegedly, he's kind of like talk show's version of the Ellen DeGeneres show. To put it that way.
Who's that?
That woman that ran that show for a while. The one who was really fake. I could pull up a picture of her and you would know her right off the bat. Wait a minute, no. There's a better version of that. James Corden. You got to know who he is. Like,
oh yeah, that yeah, I know who that is.
the big British guy, who was a little bit too much of a douche. But this woman right here, the Ellen DeGeneres show, where memes went to die. Her show.
Oh yeah. Also, I know who you're talking about. The other guy, that flamboyant fella.
Yeah, the flamboyant guy. He's flamboyant, Kathleen. But she's
yeah, he's flamboyant, Kathleen. He's just a flamboyant man. He's a singing man.
Man. But this is the lady right here, man. You remember I don't know what to do. I'll do this. you know, all that crap. She's like, okay, bring him on. He's had his 2 weeks of fame. Time to kill it off. And then the meme would come on, like whoever the meme was for that like week, and she would absolutely kill their their fame pretty much by coming on her show. It would literally kill off everyone. And so, like, I always remember that, folks, because the thing that was on the internet is like, oh, this person just got on the Ellen show where memes go to die. Because every time anyone would ever go onto the Ellen show and they became viral for a meme, literally going on her show would absolutely kill it. Because she would make it like a mainstream thing, and the meme would get corporatified, if that's a word, and it would completely lose the funniness or the edge to it. And everyone's like, oh, whatever. Like the yodeling kid actually went on to have a great music career, by the way, and he actually makes good music, just making that clear. But the yodeling side of his fame died off right after he went on the Ellen show. And everyone else did too. And also apparently she was really the rumors, well, not really the rumors, but the accusations by former staff was that she was terrible. So was James Corden. James Corden also did terribly in the ratings. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address our social media rabbit hole or entertainment rabbit hole for the night. Because I don't know how in the world we even got into this, but we've been going for a while on this stuff. So, anyways, with that, also another thing, Matthew, that Ellen, this is stuff that's confirmed right here. Another thing that Ellen did this one time, which a lot of people have just never let go, and I honestly wouldn't either, is that an actor or some sort of a celebrity, they came on the show and they were pregnant, and they weren't showing it yet because they were like 2 months pregnant or something like that. So Ellen had heard that they were pregnant, so she brought out a wine bottle on the show, and this actor wanted to keep it quiet, the celebrity or whoever it was, they wanted to keep it quiet so that way, you know, the paparazzi wasn't all up in her business while she was pregnant with this kid. So she brought out a wine bottle and poured 2 glasses, and you're not supposed to drink while pregnant. And she said, well, are you pregnant? And she said, no. Well, let's have a drink to celebrate that you're not pregnant, and pretty much force the celebrity to admit that she was pregnant and that she couldn't drink because of it, even when she didn't want anyone to know. And so a lot of people say, wow, this Ellen person is just an absolute ass for not respecting this person's wishes to not have the whole entire world know about that. And then also the celebrity went on to have a miscarriage of the child, which made it even more tragic of that whole thing. But anyways, that's one of the reasons why people are like, wow, this Ellen DeGeneres person is a douche, or generally that's like the popular belief out there. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that. Well, Matthew's gone in quiet. Matthew, are you there?
Man, that's that Hollywood junk. I don't follow that Hollywood junk.
Oh, well,
Something ain't right about that boy, Bobby.
Bobby, I tell you what, that boy ain't right. But the only reason I've heard about that before is because I heard about that when her show got canceled, and I was like, oh, her show got canceled, and then someone put out a video as to why and all the shopping lisp stuff that came out about that, and I was like, oh, dang, I was like, wow, that's douchey, like that was a douche move. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Walther P99, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Walther, for that support. He said, what would it actually take for Putin and Russia to actually stop the war? Because I'm starting to think nothing.
Economic collapse. That is the only thing that's going to stop this war at this point. Military offenses on the front will achieve nothing. I don't know why the president even wants them to do that. It's going to achieve nothing. The only thing that the Ukrainians can do is strike deep into Russia at their military and economic and war industries and drive them into the ground that way. That's really the only way the war will end at this point. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one.
All right. Also, there is one person in the chat that's like in pure disbelief that there's 2 people on this show right now. They think it's one person that's schizophrenic that might be talking to themselves. I can assure you I'm totally different. I can assure you that. And the enforcer is totally different as well. They said, I hear of Matt, but I'm not sure about this other guy. What's this other guy?
What the hell? I'm the host. I'm the main host. What the hell?
Yeah, but honestly, though, apparently they only know Matt. So, yeah, the other one, that's my brother over there.
What the hell?
Yeah, it's a brilliant guy playing both characters. It's just my puppet over there. I'm a puppet master, and the other puppet's on the string. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat here. This one goes to John Bernard, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, John, for that support. He said, how does the 19th century Crimean War inform Putin's mythology of Ukraine and rights to Crimea?
Oh, that's a good question, actually, because it really had nothing to do with Crimea back then. So also Giovanni, there is two people on the show. I'm like when I'm saying I'm the main guy, I'm the main talking guy. But like pretty much most of the stuff is half and half these days. Matthew does half the work on these streams, mostly behind the scenes where you don't see it. But as far as on air, like when we're on these streams, I'm like the main talking head. Like I do maybe like 80 to 70% of the talking every night. So when you were like, I only know a man, I was like, what the hell? I'm like, I'm the main guy yapping. Like I yap all night. It's like what I do. I was like, what the hell?
What are they really trying to say here?
I don't know. Is it some kind of conspiracy? I don't know. Heavens.
It's a theory.
And that's just a theory, a game theory. But moving on from that, to answer the question about the Crimean War. So getting into the history of the Crimean War. So after the Congress of Vienna of 1815, which largely laid out the balance of powers in Europe, the Russians started to go to war with the Ottomans, and the Ottomans were a part of the Congress of Vienna's balance of powers, which generally were supposed to lay out the idea that everyone was balanced in their military and economic might inside of Europe, so that way no one group would have power over the other and pretty much steamroll everyone. So pretty much respecting that everyone had their differences, but you know, it is what it is. Generally, that was the approach. So the Russians, through I think it was Tsar Alexander III at the time, said that they were the defender of the Eastern Orthodox faith, and they were going to go down to Constantinople, now called Istanbul, and liberate it from the Ottoman Turks, and you know, turn it back into the capital of their faith. So. Well, that was technically the justification. There were strategic reasons for it, but we won't go over all of those. Anyways, the war starts, and the Russians start steamroll. Well, they don't really steamroll exactly, but they start slaughtering Turks, especially in this little area south of Odessa, near to the area of the Danube Delta. They were slaughtering Turks in the tens of thousands. And then they also started a war in the Caucasus Mountains around Georgia, and they were also slaughtering Turks. So the Turks were like, hey, these assholes are threatening the balance of power, and this is not right. So the French and the British went, well, we can't let the Russians threaten the balance of power in Europe and violate the Congress of Vienna in 1815. So the British and the French banded together for the first time ever in military history, mind you all, and formed a fleet that sailed into the Mediterranean, through the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, into the Black Sea, and the planning was terrible, to explain it the best way I can. They landed north of Sevastopol, near to a place called Balaclava. And this is actually something that comes into fashion here in a second. But they landed north of Sevastopol, and they didn't take the port, so supplying the armies that they landed in Crimea was a little tough. So the next few months of fighting, which were mostly in the autumn and the winter, which was the hardest months to fight, were simply trying to take the port of Sevastopol from the Russians. Before the Battle of Sevastopol, there was a battle that happened right outside of there called the Battle of Balaclava, and then the British and French armies would end up largely basing out of Balaclava. Back home, the Red Cross, this was really where the Red Cross first started to show up at all, they started saying, oh, the British army's forces in Crimea are freezing in the Russian winters. There must be some way to help them. And so they ended up knitting, all the women of Britain ended up knitting these head masks that were made of wool or cotton or something else, but they allowed for little holes for the mouth and the eyes so that you could wear them but still be able to wander around. And they ended up showing up en masse, and they ended up getting named after the place that people first started to wear them, which was Balaclava. That's where the ski mask comes from that you rob banks with. It comes from the battles around Sevastopol. So anyways, the British would and the French would end up taking the city of Sevastopol during the Battle of Sevastopol in 1854 at the latter part of the year, and it would end up taking it under control. The British and the French fleets were pretty much able to rain hell on any Russian Black Sea fleets in the area, and as a result of this larger multinational action against the Russians had to relent, and the balance of power through the Congress of Vienna was restored. And so that generally is the Crimean War in a nutshell, like the simplest sort of an explanation I can give. So with that in mind, I would not really know how that plays into Putin's mythos in the modern day about Russia's claim to Crimea, because it really had nothing to do with the Crimean War. Had nothing really to do with Crimea. It's just the geographical location where a lot of the fighting happened for the British and the French in that conflict. But outside of that, it really had nothing to do with Russia's land claims over Crimea. It more so had to do with maintaining the balance of power in between the Turks and the Russians and the Congress of Vienna. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. But generally, I'd have to declare ignorance on the actual question itself, and that would be the explanation or the reasoning as to why. But a big thanks to you so much once again for the support. And I guess, folks, that in a roundabout way, you can actually blame the Russians for bank robbers, because they were the reason why the British had to, yeah, they had to make the shiesty. Bro, imagine a British army soldier charging your position and stabbing you in with a bayonet while wearing a shiesty.
Man, I'll tell you what, he pulled up and cut him with the shiesty. He was on that time.
Also, by the way, let me go show you all this, because this is actually kind of neat. Let me go show you all one of the paintings that came out of the Battle of Sevastopol. Oh, wait, hang on. Why in the world are all these Russian movies? I'm looking for, the Siege of Sevastopol. I forgot, it was besieged. Whoops. Totally different thing than the Battle of Sevastopol from World War II. Let me go get the Siege of Sevastopol. The paintings that came out of this war went hard. This is actually a painting.
Oh, I like that painting. I would like that on the wall.
Yeah, that's actually sick. Let me show y'all a couple of others that came out of it. Here's the Siege of Sevastopol. This is the British and French fleets actually bombarding Sevastopol. The mountains were dramatized, though. The mountains behind Sevastopol are not that big. Let me actually see if I can show y'all these particular mountains. So, yes, this is blocking the view. Oh, heavens. Where would we go to see the mountains? I don't think... There really isn't mountains in Crimea. That's probably the best answer I can give y'all. Let me see if I can find some picture to show y'all what it looks like facing inland. Dang, they don't really have any pictures facing inland. They like to look out towards the sea. But these are some of the mountain-ish hills that are behind Sevastopol, but they're not that big. These are almost like Alps-sized mountains behind Sevastopol. But beyond that, let me see if I can get y'all some more paintings. Here we go. Here's another painting of the Siege of Sevastopol. These paintings went hard, though. I'm not going to lie. Like, they were absolutely sick looking. I was like, damn. The Crimean War had, like, this drip about it in the paintings. Really impressive stuff. But outside of that, that is an explanation. And also, I got to thank everyone for enjoying the quick description of the Crimean War, because I pulled that all out of the back of my head. No Google searches or AI involved in that. Just had to go and remember it all. Also, that painting goes hard. I've never seen this one before, but that actually goes hard.
That does go hard. I like that.
I like that. I like that. Man, honestly, now I want to go down a rabbit hole just looking at paintings of the Siege of Sevastopol. Let me, hold up. Paintings. I spelled Sevastopol wrong. But, let's see here. We don't want the panorama. We want the real paintings. Dude, these just go hard. Like, these are great, honestly.
I like that. That is nice. That's a good painting.
That is nice. Look at this. Look at this. This is some impressive. This is from the panorama. Oops. Let's move on.
Oh, they painted it on canvas with oiled paint. So damn posh.
And then modern art. What is the meaning behind this? You can easily tell what it is. It needs to be weird geometric shapes with no real purpose. It's like, man, this goes hard though.
Modern art. Banksy making that bank. Let's shred the graffiti paper and stuff in the auction and make some extra cash.
Big thanksy to Banksy for making a bank. Man, but dude, these are some of the, dude, this was in the height of the Romanicist period of painting, by the way, so these are probably some of the best. You know, they have some really good paintings of the Franco-Prussian War, too. The Franco-Prussian War paintings. Let's see here. Like these. It goes hard. It's just amazing stuff. Like how realistic the painting started to look, and also the kind of colors that they would use. All of it's just, it paints a scene. It paints a picture. Really cool one at that. But these are, I think the Franco-Prussian Wars where a lot of those Prussian paintings that are famous come from. Like this one. This is actually a very famous painting. I believe this is the charge of the Landwehr's in I think the Battle of Sedan. But still, pretty cool paintings. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh yeah, here's another. Actually, yeah, here's another charge of the Prussians, or the North German Confederation, as they were called at that point. I don't know what battle this painting was supposed to represent, though. I don't think this is the Battle of Sedan. I think this is another battle, but still, just, I mean, the paintings are incredible. The drip is hard. But anyways, with that, I hope that is addressed that well. And so it said, art is selective. It is, but I generally like my art to actually be pleasing to the eye. And so I'm not a big fan of modern art. Some people might like it. I've never found the purpose behind it, though. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Ben, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Ben, for that support. He said, is religion the main reason why countries attack Israel? Honestly, that's the main reason for war in the Middle East. The conflict between the two religions there is what has fueled war for hundreds and hundreds of years. And unfortunately, it'll probably never stop because it's just kind of insanity that's going on. But Enforcer, what say you?
That's probably the best explanation that we could give. I mean, like, at least in the Middle East, elsewhere in the world, it's usually about resources, economics, power, those sorts of things. Here, it is generally about not only religion, but it's about culture. You see, the Jewish people in Israel aren't just targeted because they're Jews as a religion. They're targeted because they're Jews as an ethnicity. Because if you look in Syria, the Alawite Arabs of the coast are targeted because they're not Sunni Arabs, and the Druze are targeted because they're not Sunni Arabs. And they have nothing to do with being Jewish or being Jewish as ethnicity. They're just a different ethnicity than the Sunni Arabs. So they get targeted and killed. That's pretty much like the basic rundown of it, and the Kurds as well. So it really doesn't have anything to do, like, honestly, it has nothing to do with even religion, honestly. It just has to do with people being in different cultural groups, or if you want to call it, if you want to say it by an older standard, being of different races, by the older early 20th century concept of the Druze people being their own race, just because they're of a different culture and ethnicity to some minor extent. And that's generally the concept that they work off of in the Middle East, is a very early 20th century kind of a mindset of, oh, these people are the Druze. So while, it's ridiculous because it's not even religious at that point, because the Druze are also Islamic. And then they're like, oh, these Druze bastards, they're just not Sunni Arabs like we are, so let's kill them. And it's like, how in the world does this even make any sense anymore? It's like, this doesn't even go off of a ideological perspective. It's just, this guy's a Druze, let's kill him. It's like, how in the hell, I don't even know how it works, because it's not even like there's a real driving motive to the conflict. Like, it's not like, I have such a significant religious difference with this person that I have to go to war. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to go to war over that, but at least there is some sort of logic to it, even if it's in a logical standpoint. Or, these people have iron deposits that we need, so we have to go to war to take control of their iron deposits. Like, that has an actual reason behind it. Or a strategic reason, like, Ukraine's about to join NATO, let's try and stop them. Stupid to do, but still, it has some sort of strategic purpose to it. This is literally just, this guy, when he eats his hummus, he gets the bread and swipes it from the left to the right instead of right to the left, so we're gonna kill this son of a bitch. It's like, how in the world do you even make a war about minor differences like this on a cultural level? I don't even know.
Is it just because that Syria has been in a war for so long, like in some way or another, a civil war, being attacked, factions rising up, that's just like they're so used to it at this point that that's just like the normal mode of operation, because it seems like they just can't get out of this mode of just fighting nonstop. And when one faction gets removed and one faction is finally dealt with, another one rises up to fill its place. It's like, you're never going to have peace with all these different factions deciding to rise up and start gaining popularity. It's like, at some point, there's got to be some consolidation at some point. You can't just constantly keep in a perpetual state of fighting and expect everything to be fine.
Yeah, it's just bizarre. I mean, it truly is. And also, I saw someone say they're more like Zoroastrian. Zoroastrian. I don't know how to pronounce it, unfortunately, but kind of. But they're also mostly Islamic. Like that's kind of how it works. Like with the Alawite Arabs. Like, just to make the argument instead, the SIG armies ended up conducting all kinds of atrocities against everyone living in Jabal, Latakia, Tartus, and all the cities on the Alawite coast. And those people, are also Islamic. Like, they're not even Shiites. Like they're, I believe they're also Sunnis as well. It's just technically culturally they're different. And the SIG went, hey, let's just start killing them. That was months ago. There's literally nothing hardly different between them beyond the fact that they're just Alawite Arabs. And then the Sunni Arabs are the ones in the SIG. It just does not make any sense at all. It truly doesn't. I would have to say, the best way that I can, that the whole reason why there's endless conflict and slaughter going on in Syria is because the folks in Syria are working off of very backwards concepts. Like, that's probably the best way that I can put it, because the only way I could describe it is going off of a concept that is a century obsolete, is the reason why all of this is happening in Syria. And that is a century behind us at this point. We move far beyond those sorts of kinds of concepts or ideals, and yet they still live in that time as far as their decision making and the atrocities that they're conducting against each other. That's really the only way that we can quantify and explain what they're doing, and it's backwards for that. And so I hope that addresses that the best I can. I think that's the best way I could address it. But still, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. But it's a ridiculous sort of thing that goes on in Syria. And at this point, I'm also starting to believe that it might be really hard-pressed to ever find peace in Syria. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Espen Turgenhagen, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Espen, for that $20 support. I do not see a comment attached with it, but thank you very much, Espen, for, of course, helping to keep the channel running. And we do appreciate that very much. We also have a 14 from Verna Weeks, who said, thank you for the news and the views and LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for enjoying the news, Verna Weeks, and thank you for supporting it so that way we can keep this thing running. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next. Also, really quickly, I do want to say this as well. I see some people saying, and I want to make this clear because I see some people always making these arguments. Some people are like, oh yes, it boils down to they're Islamic. It does not. Because if let's debunk that argument. If it was about they're Islamic, therefore they're violent, how come Jordan, which is an Islamic kingdom, and Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar and Bahrain are all stable? Like, Islam is not the root cause of the issues in the Middle East. The root cause in Syria is this backwards belief that just because there is a slightly different culture that persists in Syria, like Alawite Arabs or the Druze or the Kurds, that they're barbarians or subhuman and they deserve to die. That's the main issue in Syria right now, is that mindset, not Islam, because there are plenty other countries in the region that are Islamic and entirely stable, and that generally disproves the claim. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Wes Trueblood III, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Wes, for that support as well. He said, need a U.S. Army song only intro to spare the audience from time to time. And he puts in a smiley face and says, hooah.
And I thank you so much for support. That's a pretty funny one. But I always want to make sure that we give a huge tribute to all the armed forces, because I have a great deal of respect and appreciation for all the folks who are currently serving and have formerly served in all the armed forces, because each one of those branches has a very important part in serving this country. And I also like all their songs, just to be entirely honest. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. But I like the spirit. And good to know that you're proud of your service in the Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to SD NSO Group Unit 46, who puts in a 10 and says, thank you.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, SD NSO Group Unit 46, because folks like you make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from J-Man, who said, I love the show and I love my LSA flag.
Hey, and I love to hear that you love the LSA flag, J-Man. Hopefully we'll be able to get more of those out here in the future, because I know a lot of people are itching to get one, and I want to make sure that we can get some out there as much as we can. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from your Fubar, who said, do you think Putin would consider buying Chinese fighter jets in exchange for land in the far east of Russia?
I don't think so. I think the Russians will want to maintain their territory, and also I don't think China actually wants to physically control any territory that is currently Russia's, beyond the small islands in the Amur River that they're still contesting even today. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. I thank you for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Alaska. And Alaska said, how many years will it take the Russian economy to return to pre-invasion levels? And the Russians, as I see it, will be the economic turmoil for several generations.
It would take them about a generation or two to return back to economic levels, pre-war economic levels, in my opinion, because it took them about that long to even try and stabilize and be a shadow of their former selves during the Soviet Union. So I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have an $8 super chat from Margaret Hemsley, who said, grandson Eddie's 1-year birthday party. And also, happy birthday to Eddie, by the way. She said he thinks this is the best channel. So here's a little present, and also get a live chat question.
And thank you to grandson Eddie for the support. And also, happy birthday to grandson Eddie, 1-year-old. Very nice to hear. And I'd love to hear that he enjoys the show. Another new and uprising member of the Lee Spring Army. And we welcome him, and we hope that he grows up to be a great and incredible Prime Minister of Australia one day. And so, a huge thanks to you so much once again. A huge thanks for the kind words and the praise. And we will make sure to get a little live chat question in honor of 1-year-old Eddie. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And this live chat question goes to CIA, who said, do you think that Israel is destabilizing Syria with its airstrikes, which many nations have condemned? No. I'll say this. Israel is not destabilizing anything. And this is not an insult to your question, by the way. I'm just speaking in general because I've heard analysts say that. Syria is already in pure chaos. There's no more you could destabilize Syria. Israel is simply protecting their interests in the south, which are the Druze people. Now, there is some controversy about that because, some people believe, does Israel really have a right to go into Syria to protect a people that's within the Syrian country? I would personally say yes, but I could see a different argument on that. But I would say they do have a right to do that because Syria right now does not have a really consolidated government. Jelani is basically a terrorist, and Israel is doing what they have to do, basically, and they're getting work done. So I would say no, they're absolutely not destabilizing it, and they do have a right to go in there. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that in my opinion, oh heavens, let me make sure that I get a good answer to that. No, it's not destabilizing. I had to make sure to go reread it to make sure that I knew what I was saying. I would say no. Syria is already destabilized. No matter which way you try and split the air, it's destabilized. That's just the basic answer to it. And so the Israelis are doing nothing to further exacerbate the situation rather than try and protect the Druze from the massacre that's going on in the destabilized Syria that already exists. So I would say that Israel's actions in Syria certainly are not destabilizing the domestic situation inside of the country. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And a big thanks to you once again for asking an interesting question. It's not at all a bad one. That's actually a prevailing mindset out there for some people, but I generally would disagree. I don't think it's doing anything to further destabilize the country. And so with that, we are on to the next one. A big thanks for the question, and a big thanks to you, Margaret Hemsley, for sponsoring that live chat and helping the channel to keep rolling.
Yes, indeed. And also, someone said, a bot came in and said that this channel has become boring. Well, I'm sorry there's not enough war for you. Whoops. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat here. This one goes to Joshua A, who puts in a 5. They said, amazing reporting per usual.
And thank you so much for enjoying the reporting, Joshua. We're always proud to do it, and we're happy to know that folks like you enjoy it enough to help us to keep it running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from the Wooden Sailor, who said, LSA.
Hey, an LSA, and a big thanks to you for the support as well, and helping this channel to keep on rolling so that way we can keep saying, long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from United Kempo Martial Arts Academy. He said, any update on the Russian nuclear facilities plans leaked from the maintenance companies? And what do you think will come from it, if anything? And also a big fan in, I believe, New Zealand, New Zealand?
New Zealand? New Zealand? Big fan in Australia. Australia, that's an AU.
Is it Australia?
AU for Australia. And I gotta
think... dear, Australia, hit down under.
Oh, great heavens. But beyond that, I thank you so much for the support. And helping this channel to keep running. And as far as the leak happened, and everyone in the world, every intelligence organization has access to the materials, but the Russians haven't shut down those facilities, and it doesn't appear that they're building new ones yet, probably because they don't have the money to do it. So generally, Russia's security is compromised. in a go situation, if something was to happen and they were trying to use those facilities, it may be that they've been compromised so badly that they might be knocked out or completely debilitated from operation before they can be called into action. But we haven't seen any developments off of that so far. It's more so something that will be used at an opportune time in a moment that we will hopefully never see happen in our lifetime. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to none other than Hoodoo, Texas, who puts in a $5 donation. And he said, Reuters, Australia's government says it has just delivered 49 M1A1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine.
Really? I swore that I remember hearing that they were going to bury all of those. Or were those the helicopters? I believe those may have actually been the helicopters that they were burying. Why do they bury them? I don't know. They could just put them in the outback like we do at the Boneyard in Tucson, Arizona, because it's humid. Nothing much will happen to them. But for some reason, they wanted to bury them. But beyond that, that's good to hear that they were able to deliver 49 Abrams. I believe that they are of the M1A1 variety. I think they might even be M1A1HCs, but I'm not entirely sure what exact variant they are. They are an M1A1, but which M1A1 variant, I'm unsure. But that's still great to hear that they did get 49 of them from the Australians. I didn't hear about that today, but I believe I heard that they were sending those about 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. So huge thanks to you so much for sharing that with us once again and supporting this channel. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $4 super chat from Plazoth, and thank you very much, Plazoth, for that support as well. We also have a 2 from Laura Brown, who did not leave a comment either, but thank you, Plazoth and Laura, very much for that support. We also have a 2 from LSA Sergeant Figment, who said, LSA, hit the like button, that's an order.
And thank you so much for the support, LSA Sergeant Figment. And please, folks, do hit that like button. That is an order from none other than LSA Sergeant Figment. We've hit 4,700 likes again nearly tonight, so hopefully we can get it on higher. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Laser314, who said the list is simply theoretical list.
Yeah, I suppose. It must be theoretical, perhaps. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Kyle Padell, who said, sorry, Matt and Enforcer, Nightbot always killing it.
Oh, it is? I didn't know, actually. But I do thank you for support, Kyle Fidel, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from $2 Garage, who said, so Syria, I'm not sure if I can make this joke, I'll be honest with you, $2 Garage, but thank you very much for that $2 support, and we do appreciate that very much. We also have a 2 from a boy, who said, also, China had paid Putin to invade, got bogged down west.
I don't know if the Chinese paid the Russians to invade Ukraine, because I don't think you could have paid them enough for the amount of damage they've sustained. You'd have to have paid them trillions. And I think that sort of money would be noticeable even if you tried to hide it if the Russians got it. You would start noticing things like Putin wearing dripped out Yeezys or something like that. But a big thanks to you for the support, Boy Kachina. Perhaps, maybe, but I'm still thinking it's unlikely. But with that, folks, we've actually addressed the last super chat of the time for right now. And with that, folks, it is time for us to move on to that second segment of the live chat segment. The second segment of the stream, second segment of the live chat section, where we can get into the live chats. And boy, howdy, folks, that's a fun time in its own right, because we get to answer all kinds of questions. Amazing questions. Incredible, eye-opening, wonderful questions. But before we move on into that, Matthew, I've been looking into the expeditions of a Captain James Cook. Have you ever heard of Captain Cook before?
Yeah, he was on the Star Trek Enterprise.
No, not that Cook. I'm talking about the real Captain James Cook, the one that traveled around in the Pacific to the Sandwich Islands, now known as Hawaii.
Is that where the Earl of Sandwich came from?
No. The Earl of Sandwich comes from this little area of Britain. He actually is the creator. The 14th Earl of Sandwich is actually the inventor of the sandwich.
Did you know there's a restaurant called Earl of Sandwich?
Yes, I did.
Yes, it's good sandwiches.
Yes, it's just quite good sandwiches. But if y'all didn't know, a little history about the sandwich. The 14th Earl of Sandwich was busy doing clerical work one day, and so he called up, I believe it was believe it was either a chambermaid or a normal maid, just a general housemaid. And he said, "I'm really busy and I can't get up to eat. Bring me something quick. Just go get a slab of meat and put it in between two pieces of bread, so that way I don't get grease all over my hands because I'm, working with paper and a quill, and I don't want that all over the paper." So she went and got the slab of meat and put two pieces of bread on the side, so that way his hand wouldn't get covered in grease or any kind of juice from the meat, and thus the sandwich was born. And that's actually where the sandwich came from. And then it became incredibly popular beyond the 14th Earl of Sandwich. It blew up, and everyone started loving sandwiches. And honestly, sandwiches are great. Like, you can make so many amazing kinds of sandwiches. So that guy,
What's the difference? What's the difference between a maid and the chamber one?
Chambermaids were more so for helping you to get dressed and tending to things in the bedroom, like setting the beds, getting baths going, that sort of thing. That was like a whole deal in itself. And then a general maid was generally cleaning open spaces for, entertainment, like, living room. Well, not really living rooms, but entertainment rooms, ballrooms, those sorts of things. There were actually significant differences. You usually would have specialized maids for different rooms or tasks in a house or a manor during that era. So you generally have like a general maid, chambermaids, all those sorts of deals.
Sounds pretty lazy to me. They got to have somebody turn on the water and get the clothes out of the closet. I mean, sounds pretty lame.
Yeah, it sounds kind of lame. Honestly, man, housework was a lot back then, like loads.
It still is.
Yeah, it still is. But imagine, man, imagine when nothing was mechanized, though. Like, there was no mechanization to anything. Well, not mechanization. That's a military term. No, I guess you say
Automation.
yeah, automation. That's the word I'm looking for. No automation in anything, so all clothes had to be hand cleaned and dried. All those sorts of deals. Like, everything was complicated. Hot bath, no plumbing, so they had to go heat the water or find a way to boil the water and then pour it in for you, and then keep pouring it in or removing water at your demand to keep the bath comfortable at a comfortable temperature. Like, all that sort of stuff was very, very complicated back then. So it required an army, especially if you had a manor, an army of maids, groundskeepers, launderers, all those sorts of people to just keep one household running.
The launderers. That's how they got the money in the first place, wasn't it? They had the launderers get it. They put it in the launder. They got it good, and they sent it to the bank.
Yes, that is actually the way they did it. I actually think that money laundering, or the phrase laundering, actually comes from the launderers of the time. Like, I'll have to look into that. I'm not sure on that one, but beyond that, getting back to the original thing really quickly, the Captain James Cook. Did you know, Maddie, that he was actually the one who discovered Hawaii? At least for us here in the West, he was the first one to discover the islands of Hawaii.
Yeah, I remember back in the day that he was real skeptical about like discovering it because the prime directive like prevented him from actually making contact with the people there. So he was like he was having to like skirt around the edges and stuff and make sure he didn't make contact.
Well, he actually went right in. He actually died in Hawaii. If you didn't know, he got his head cracked open with a rock.
Yeah, shouldn't violate the prime directive. That's a good example.
Yeah, it's a big example, big example. But Matthew, there was a guy, Matthew, that was with Captain James Cook when he died at Hawaii. You know who that person was?
Spock.
No, William Bligh. And you know what William Bligh went on to do?
What'd he do?
He went on to command His Majesty's armed ship, the Bounty, and he was the one who actually had the Bounty mutiny happen on him.
Interesting. That's the one who went around the Horn?
He tried to go around the Horn, and then they went around the Cape of Good Hope, and then went over to Tahiti, which is right here in French Polynesia. This is Tahiti. They went to Tahiti, they gathered up the breadfruit, and then they left, and then that's when the mutiny happened. And then he got thrown off, and then he sailed the launch 3,000 something miles or so, and also mapped the coast of Australia while he did, and then reported the mutiny, and the mutineers were ordered to be found and then hanged by order. But most of them were never found. Some of them were, and then they ended up dying on the voyage back when the ship sank and everything. But beyond that, though, the Bounty, the impressive story of the Bounty. But something else that's interesting, folks, to share with you all a little bit of interesting history I've been looking into, because the voyages of the British in the Pacific during that time is actually a really interesting time, because it's like the crazy kind of adventures that you would think of when you think of seafaring during that age. This is really the period that it happened was during the time of Captain Cook, and also the time that the bounty mutiny happened against Second Lieutenant Bligh. He wasn't a captain yet; he was a lieutenant still, and that's when the mutiny happened against him. But when he got back to Britain, he actually was absolved of any fault in the mutiny. Because, he was actually scrutinized if he was responsible for the mutiny. But he was absolved of any guilt. All of the guilt was thrown onto, I forgot his first name, but it was something Christian. Christian Fletcher, that was, or Fletcher Christian, it was one way or the other. But all of the guilt was thrown on him, and then they went out to go and try and find them all and kill them. So after that, they actually gave him the command of a second ship, because his mission was to go to Tahiti and get the breadfruit. And the breadfruit was to explain to y'all what was going on. The burgeoning slave populations of the Americas at the time were starting to run out of available cheap food. And so they were trying to find a food that would be cheap and available for the slaves to be able to eat, that they would accept. So one of the concepts was that this new plant that had been heard of on the expeditions of Captain Cook, the breadfruit from Tahiti, might actually be that kind of abundant food source that they're looking for. So Bligh's first mission on the bounty was to go find the breadfruits, bring them back to the British colonies in the Caribbean, and see if if the slaves would actually eat them. So it turns out on the second expedition, it actually succeeded. He did end up getting the breadfruits to the British colonies in the Caribbean, and then the slaves refused to eat any of it. So the whole expedition was completely pointless, because all the breadfruits were abandoned and they were actually burned, because no one was eating them. No one wanted them, and they tasted like shit. Obviously, no one would want to eat them. So that was literally the whole reason they conducted the expedition. Speaking about that, but also one thing that's also interesting is that I forgot what I tried to look into the reasoning of it. I'm still researching it. It's a really interesting sort of a topic, but the reason why the slaves wouldn't eat the breadfruit is because for something about it made them say that the breadfruits were cursed and they refused to eat it. And you can't force anyone to eat. Even with the horrendous conditions of slavery in the Caribbean, they still couldn't force or compel a slave to eat something they didn't want to eat. So they just threw all the breadfruit away, and the whole adventure was completely pointless. But I'm still trying to look into why the breadfruit was rejected and no one would eat it, because I've heard that it's not really a palatable sort of a fruit or a food, and it's not even really that good, but something about it was just so heinous they wouldn't even eat it. So I was like, what's so bad about the breadfruit? Like, what was it that made everyone not even accept it at all? But anyways, after that, William Bligh would actually go on to serve and command a whole bunch of British vessels throughout his service in the Royal Navy, and then by the end of his career, he actually became, I believe it was the second governor of New South Wales. So pretty much the founding of Australia. He was one of the main governors of the beginnings of the Australia penal colony that later turned into the country of Australia.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, so the guy actually had a pretty interesting life about him, and also the guy was a great cartographer as well. And his map that he made, his cartography of the Hawaiian island chain was so good that the naval charts were actually used all the way up until 1962 from his original illustrations and cartography of the Hawaiian Islands.
Now that is interesting.
Yeah,
Also,
really.
by the way, you do know there is a way to, at least in the modern day, to make people eat.
Yeah, you can intravenously feed them, but back then that wasn't an option.
Yeah, that wasn't an option back then, but these days, though, they've got ways.
They do have ways today, but back then that didn't exist. So if people just outright refused to eat something, there was no way to force them. You just couldn't make them eat. And also another thing, folks, is that I've been trying to read Bligh's like an electronic copy of Bligh's logs and records, and it was like some of the stuff they dealt with after they got thrown off the ship and put into the launch was crazy, because they actually landed a couple of days after the mutiny on an island near to Fiji. I forgot which one it was, because there's a load of islands around Fiji, but they landed on an island near to Fiji, and the people there were actually cannibals, and they ended up killing one of the people he was on the launch with, one of the quartermasters. And so he knew that they were going to kill him, and this was interesting because apparently all of the Pacific Island peoples at the time, if they were cannibals and they were getting ready to attack, they would get these stones and they would start to beat them together, like in like a beat or like a rhythm, nearly to signal to everyone that they're going to get ready to kill whoever they're about to attack. So Bly noticed that, and he was writing in his logbook at the time, and he started writing, and he said, due to the kind of nature of these peoples, I do not believe that our welcome will be lasting for much longer. And so he closed the logbook, man, and then they went running for the boat. Like, they went running, like, just absolutely ran. So then the quartermaster guy that died, he actually hopped off the boat with a cutlass to try and ward off the islanders. And in the process, he got overwhelmed. They threw him to the ground, and then they bashed his head open with a rock and killed him. And everyone else got away, but he was the only guy who ended up dying on the island. So
He hopped in the cutlass, you say?
well, it was a cutlass sword. Like, let me cutlass sword.
You're not referring to the Oldsmobile, are you?
No, I'm referring to this kind of a sword.
I know, I'm just being goofy.
Man, he's being silly, and I didn't catch on.
Man,
The joke
you know what an Oldsmobile cutlass looks like? I bet you don't even know what kind of car that is, do you?
I know what it is a little bit. Oldsmobile.
You're too young for that one.
Oh, get the hell out of here! Oh, get the hell.
Look at that. There it is. Old cutlass right there. People like to get these right here and put like bigger engines and stuff in them and like make them hop and stuff like that. Like dragsters and stuff. People like to turn these cutlasses into dragsters.
Really?
Yeah, not that your model, like you're not obviously not convertible, but like the hard top over there, like the white paint job, like yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, these right here, they'll turn these into like dragsters.
Huh. That's actually interesting right there. Um, so do they also do like the lift thing where like it has like the hydraulic like struts where it like can flip up the car?
You can, but I mean these aren't really like low riders or something. I mean, when I say it hops, like I mean like it's got so much torque and power, like the front end like jumps up like wheelies.
Dang, that's actually crazy.
Yeah, they got like loose suspension, so it's like really easy to hop the front axle off the ground.
Hmm. That's interesting. Also, I saw a
This thing right here was a boat, though. This thing right here, it was the barge. You could like sail this thing around the bend and around the horn and everything.
Oh, bruh, send this thing around the horn. See how it does, man. But I also saw Jay Nosel say, man, it's terrible that they were looking for food for slaves. Slavery shouldn't have even happened. Yeah, like I would agree. But still, it's just a part of the story for the large part as to why they were even out there in the Pacific in the first place for the mutiny to happen. And then the whole irony of it is that even if the mutiny had failed and he had succeeded in his original mission, it was entirely pointless from the outset. Like it was completely pointless because they were taking a crappy food item to go and try and feed these people who are in the objectively worst conditions ever. Because if y'all don't know anything about what slavery was like historically during the period, any slaves in the Caribbean were pretty much on death camps. The conditions were horrendous in every colony in the Caribbean. Malaria and all kinds of diseases were wiping literally everyone out that was down there continuously. Even people who were non-slaves would end up dying of malaria a great deal. So it was pretty much a death camp down here in the Caribbean. That's opposite, though, of most other slave populations elsewhere in the Americas, because most of the slave populations within the colonial Americas actually always saw positive growth because the conditions were not literal death camp type conditions. But in the Caribbean, it was quite truly death camp sort of conditions with the diseases, the lack of resources, all those sorts of things. So absolutely heinous. And then on top of that, in the middle of them pretty much living on island death camps, they bring them shitty fruits to eat, and then no one even eats them because they stink and don't taste good. But the conditions were so bad, this is actually the only place that the slaves revolted and such great strength and violence that they actually created their own independent country, which is Haiti. Haiti is actually the only successful slave revolt in modern history that turned itself into an independent country, because this was a part of the island of La Española, and this part of Haiti was actually controlled by the French. And in 1798, a slave revolt would occur here, and the entirety of the slave population revolted practically overnight. So they overwhelmed the 10% of the population that were pretty much the French captors of the slaves, and ended up killing all of them. And that's how Haiti came to be as an independent country. century. That's how bad the conditions were, is that unlike other areas where slave revolts were very limited and didn't really succeed much, here in the Caribbean, it was so bad that there was really no other way to survive rather than to revolt, and that's actually why Haiti exists in the modern day. It's an interesting part of history, that is. But anyways, with that, we do have to get some live chat, folks, and it's time for us to get on into some, some interesting questions. So, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we do have 2 more super chats. This one goes to BA Technologies, who put in a 10. He said, first chance to donate. Great job, y'all, and LOC.
And hey, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And thank you for supporting this channel, BA Technologies, and helping us to keep this thing running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from Cody Fritz, who said the story of the Essex, where Moby Dick came from.
The story of the whaling ship, the Essex. That's a lot of the sailing stories of the old days are actually really wild and crazy and interesting, and also really honestly, the life of a sailor back in the day was a very hard and brutal life, but it was also one that was filled with a lot of interesting times, like, arriving to a tropical place like Tahiti in the 1700s was surreal for a lot of people. They were like, oh my god, this is crazy, for a load of reasons. Like, I'm not going to get into those reasons, but it was crazy. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support, Cody Fricks, and thank you for sharing that little part of history as well. And so big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, it's time for us to get on into some live chat questions.
All right, now up first we have our Morse code decoders. We have Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Erbo Garbo, and Heroial Fluffiness. They said, the Morse says, Moscow be getting hit and burning like a Moscow. Let's send Putin to the somewhere, LOT, LOC.
And ding, 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 and that's the sound of money. And y'all got that down on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all greatly for getting that correct time and time again. Because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a big congratulations to y'all once again in the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps, and I hope that addressed it wildly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from Rhoda, who said, how many dumpster fires do Ukrainian drones cause annually? I was just wondering. You don't need to answer, but I would like to know.
I would assume a lot, actually, because they usually do, and we get them on film. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Yeti. It says, Matt, why? It's the Yeti. I screamed like crazy, but I can't do it. But anyways, Yeti said, Matt, why have the Russians avoided using thermobaric bombs to push the Ukrainians back?
Actually, they haven't really avoided it too much. They have used them throughout the war. It's just that they never really get an opportune ability to use them. Because if you're speaking about the airdrop bombs, they have to get somewhat close because they're dumb bombs, and they have to pretty much drop them dead on the target. So they can't ever really do that because of the present air defense. So that's generally why you haven't seen a lot of them used. As far as glide bombs, though, they did make glide bomb kits for a few of those bombs around the Avdiivka front during the Battle of Avdiivka. But even still, those dropped off heavily in usage for unknown reasons. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I know at the moment. And with that, I also see a lot of people talking about the reason why Haiti, well, not Haiti, Tahiti was like an exotic place. And that is a part of it, but there was also a whole bunch of other things, like it was a luxurious lifestyle compared to being a sailor. Like, like just being honest. Being a sailor, you lived in cramped conditions, the ship smelled like piss and shit and vomit every day, because that's what a lot of people, it sloshed around, so it gets everywhere. The scent is everywhere. Like, being on a sailing ship back in the day was not a glamorous life. It was a pretty rough one. You would end up getting diseases, scurvy, all those sorts of things because of a lack of nutrition and a lack of cleanliness. It was hell on earth. So when you show up to a place like Tahiti, which is a very lush sort of environment with lots of food, the island of Fiji was known for its abundance of food, especially for the seafarers of the age. The food was literally endless. And then on top of that, you have the very attractive women on the island. It's a very sort of an appealing sort of a thing to stay. That's also why the Royal Navy really set up Bligh to fail on the bounty venture, because they sent him not even as a captain, not with a detachment of Marines to protect him from the crew, pretty much, or to protect the officers from the crew. He had no other supporting officers, and then they send him to there, which is literally like the most appealing thing after being at sea for months and months on end in a shitty ship. And then they send everyone there, and then they expect them not to mutiny. It's like, of course they're going to mutiny. I mean, you know, they set the guy up for failure from the outset on this voyage. But anyways, that's generally the reason why. But it's not just the women like the movies would make it out to be. It was a whole bunch of other things like food and the quality of life that you could never get on a ship. And also you have to remember that everyone on the Bounty that was not Bly and was not Christian Fletcher were all, literally all of them, except for kind of like the bosun's mates. Every single one of them was press ganged into the Navy. They were forced to be there. Someone grabbed them while they were drunk in a bar, beat them silly, and then threw them on a ship and forced them to stay on there for a couple of years. So not a lot of those people were even happy to be in the Navy, and then they wind up there. And for them, that's veritable paradise. So why in the world would anyone not mutiny to stay in Fiji? Like, they screwed the guy over. They set him up to fail on the Bounty venture, whether they knew it or not. But anyways, with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one also, I'll feed my pigeons Fiji water. but anyways, getting on to our next question. This one goes to you, Dalton. He said, do you think Ukraine should have its nukes returned to stop Russia once and for all? And thank you very much. I say no, absolutely not. We should not give Ukraine their nukes back not because I'm trying to be mean to Ukraine or something, but I don't believe in nuclear proliferation. They already gave them up, and the U.S. should simply uphold their end of the memorandum, and that should be the end of it. But no, I don't believe in giving nukes back. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I do not believe in giving nuclear weapons back at all. And I would have to agree with Matthew on that. And so I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and this one is going to go to none other than, also let me get rid of this bot real quick, who said that, here's the bot. This is the bot line of thinking. Russia could have won the war, guys. You're misinformed. You're goofy. I said, so why didn't they crush Ukraine if they could have won the war, buddy? I mean, they just chose to lose it just because they felt like losing today? I mean, they woke up and said, let's lose the war. They said, it's because of politics. I said, so politics caused Russia to lose the war. I said, what do you mean, like, politics caused them to lose it? Explain. He said, lose? Like Hillary? I was like, oh, okay. You're one of those. But anyways, jumping into our next one here. This one goes to Epic Trains Canada. He said, what could Ukraine do to speed up the collapse of Russia's economy?
Well, you can attack their petroleum and oil refineries. That's probably going to be the easiest thing to do. And you could then also... Really, that's just the number one way to do it, just attack oil refineries. That will eventually destroy the Russian economy. And if we wanted to help them, we just apply full encompassing sanctions on their petroleum and oil industries. And that's about it. At that point, you have doomed the Russians economically. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And Matthew, wasn't that the final question of the night right there?
No, then we have one more.
Heavens, I lost count there for a second. But with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So, who is the last person that threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one goes to Doug Chumley. And he said, Matt, is the U.S. military equipped to deal with the FPV drone warfare used by Ukraine?
That's a little bit tough to say. I don't really know what kind of anti-drone weaponry we're starting to implement across the armed forces. So I generally have to declare ignorance on that at the moment, because we're hearing of some attempts to try and bring in some anti-drone warfare elements, but it doesn't appear to be all encompassing at the moment. So generally at face value right now, we're not, but we're working towards being able to deal with drones and the threat of drones, but not at the moment right now. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I have to thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be watching this stream. Well, to be talking on the stream with all of you. What the hell am I saying? But it's been an honor to be able to present all of this news to y'all and have y'all watching the show today. We've had a peak viewership of 15.5 thousand people tonight, and 160,000 people have watched this show before it ended. We thank you all so much once again for spending loads of y'all's time here watching the Enforcer News channel. And if you're new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe. We run these sorts of shows every single day of the week, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every night, covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world. And so with that, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And if there's enough news in the middle of the day tomorrow, I will be the one making the short war video for all of you all. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us once again tonight, and all 160,000 people that are here by the end of the stream. Quite a large stream tonight, if I do say so myself. And we hope to see every single one of you tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern on the next stream that we have at our usual time. And also, if there is enough news to cover, which I'm a little bit iffy about tomorrow, so I'm a little bit unclear, and you know, because I said that something large will probably happen. But tomorrow, midday, the Enforcer will be bringing that video to you if there is enough news to cover. But with that, of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.